Ray Beck, will you please lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you, Ray. Well, welcome to day 2 of our Summer Policy Committee meetings. We're looking forward to some really great conversations throughout the morning, and then we'll wrap up the day with some lunch and then head you all on your way home. So we're going to start the morning again with federal updates, and we will start again with the most senior office representing United States Senator Michael Bennet, John Whitney.
That's me.
That's you.
Thank you, Christian. Great to be here again at my alma mater, and really excited this morning to share some updates with you. First and foremost, I've been up early this morning working on something that Senator Bennet and his team have worked on for over 10 years, and we're excited today to send out a press release as soon as I get back to my computer. We'll get it out that we are introducing the Dolores River National Conservation Area legislation. And our main partners on that bill right here, Steve Garcher from Dolores County, and there's been a lot of dialogue on that river over the years. Started years ago, back in probably about 05 or so, with the Dolores River dialogue.
95 or better.
Steve, of course, has been there the whole time. But it's a complicated river, and a lot of competing demands on folks' perspective on how it should be managed. And the federal government, of course, has considered it a suitable river for wild and scenic for a long time, and that's caused a lot of concern and consternation. And Steve Harris and I here, I think my first job as a congressional aide was getting the government-to-government roundtable together for Steve, working with John Salazar, to bring people to the table to talk about those wild and scenic proposals, because they caused a lot of concern in the water community, and justifiably so. Wild and scenic suitability or designation could really upend the distribution system for water within any given watershed. So a lot of concern about that. So folks came to the table more and more, through several different processes to talk about the Dolores River. A big group was convened from all stakeholders. I think there's about 80 people that would meet out there for several years, back around 20, this way back, help me out, see, like 08, 09, 010, somewhere in there.
The first time around,
Yeah.
On the big group.
Yeah, and so that group concluded the best idea might be to think about a federal bill that could remove wild and scenic suitability from the river and replace it with a national conservation area. So it sounds easy in concept, it's not. It took a lot of years of sitting at the table and working, and our office worked with multiple counties on this, and there was the times county said, well, we're interested, and other times it said they're not. And we honestly didn't know if it was going to happen or not. But Steve in Dolores County a few years back said, hey, why don't we get back to the table and figure this out? And so we did, and we sat down, we talked it out, and we spent more years working on it. And Michael came down here and met with the group, and we had a lot of conversations. And finally we have a bill that we're introducing in the Senate today with our partner, Senator John Hickenlooper in the Senate, and it will. The bill will propose to have a national conservation area within 3 counties: Dolores, San Miguel, and Montezuma. The bill also has the support of the Mountain Ute tribe, who of course gets most of their water for their farm and ranch operation from McPhee Reservoir in the Dolores River. The bill also has the support of folks from the conservation community. It's got the support of the grazing permittee that runs cattle out in that country, Al Eaton. So we're pretty excited about that. It took a long time to get there, but excited to get that bill introduced last evening in the United States Senate, and look forward to working on that and seeing if we can move things forward. It really represents, I think, the kind of work we can do on the ground here in Southwest Colorado. It's hard to do it in DC, but here in Colorado, we can sort of roll up our sleeves and get Republican counties, Democratic counties, and folks together to figure out a common ground, middle ground compromise that works for everybody. So super excited about that today. And I'll be leaving here shortly to send that press release out there. And I just want to thank Steve for his work. It would not have happened without Dolores County, and Steve Garcher and the commissioners there have really been instrumental to it. So excited to see that.
Thank you, John. Thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. Another topic I just wanted to touch on real quickly, wildfire forestry continues to be a critical issue for Colorado. A couple quick updates on that. Last week, we were very excited to see that 5 Coloradans were appointed to the new wildfire commission that the bipartisan infrastructure law set up to really study like how we're going to grapple with our challenges with forestry and wildfire. And this commission is charged by law with making recommendations to the Secretary of Interior and Secretary of Ag and the Forest Service to really get a handle on this. And so Senator Bennett lobbied for a lot of Coloradans to be included on this. And frankly, we succeeded pretty well. We got 5 out of 36 are going to be from Colorado. Some of those folks include Dan Gibbs, who's director of our Department of Natural Resources, Scott Miller from Conservation Community, and then Mike, I'm sorry? Jim Hubbard, thank you. Yeah, our former state forester, Jim Hubbard, Madeline. I'm forgetting Madeline's last name, but she's a water quality specialist from Denver. And then Mike Morgan, who is the head of fire prevention and fighting efforts for the state. So really excited to see that, and a lot happening in the forestry realm. That Senator Bennett has been at the Senate Ag. He is the chair of the forestry subcommittee on the Senate Ag committee, so he spends a lot of time, leading the work in the Senate on forestry issues. The bipartisan infrastructure law, we got an incredible down payment on our forestry work. I think $5.5 billion, if I remember. Does that sound right, Helen? $5.5 billion total in that bill for forestry work. And we're starting to see that hit the ground. Michael was up, Michael Bennett and John Hickenlooper were up with the chief of the Forest Service up in Boulder County back in May, announcing the first tranche of that money that's hitting Colorado. The first tranche is hitting that high priority fire shed on the Front Range. The Forest Service 10-year plan, they identified that as a real priority. They also identified our corner of the state as a priority fire shed down here in Southwest Colorado. So we're excited about that as well, because we certainly deserve that designation. But the money's starting to flow. We've been assured by the Forest Service and USDA that in years 2, 3, 4, and 5 of implementation of that funding, a lot more of that money is going to come to the western slope. They've given us that assurance. We're excited because we need that money desperately. Michael was here just last fall, right up the overlook here, looking out over Durango and talking to community leaders here, our county commissioners and mayors and others about, how much work we need to do in the forest near Durango. And it's daunting. And a lot of it is very expensive work. It's not the kind of work where you get a great product for the sawmill. It's more, you got to pull out the small diameter stuff and thin it and burn it. And that takes a lot of money. And frankly, we hear from local communities that they don't have the resources and the funding to do that themselves. And really the only entity that Michael thinks does have the money to really challenge or to meet the challenge of the scope and the scale of what we need to do is the federal government. So he's really championing that in the U.S. Senate. He put out a marker bill called the Outdoor Restoration Partnership Act for $60 billion for watershed restoration and forestry work, and really laid that marker down as chairman of the forestry committee to say, look, this is what we need to do. It's time for the feds to get serious. And we didn't pull that number out of a hat. That number came from a group of scientists that wrote a letter to Senator Bennett and said, look, we're going to get serious about addressing our forest challenges. We got to spend about $60 billion over a decade to do it. The head of the Forest Service, I think actually the number 2 of the Forest Service, also testified before the Senate, before Michael's committee, and said, look, we're going to get serious. We need about $60 billion over 10 years. So Michael put that bill out there and led the fight for that. We came very, very close to securing most of that funding in the budget reconciliation conversation that's happened within the last 6-7 months. We passed a version of that in the House that Michael worked on the language very closely with the Senate Agriculture Committee and our colleagues in the House, and it would have had $52 billion. So you take that and you take the money in the bipartisan infrastructure law, we're actually going to get to $60 billion. Unfortunately, that budget bill did not pass. It passed the House. It ran aground in the Senate, where often good bills go to die, as we all know. So, but Michael's going to continue to fight for that funding. If there is, a new budget bill that gets going in the Senate, there are discussions happening right now he's going to be right there in the thick of things, demanding that one of the priorities we include in that bill is funding for our Western Forest to do the work that we need to do here on the ground. So stay tuned on that. We'll also continue to fight in the upcoming Farm Bill, which Michael chairs the Forestry Committee, as I said, so he'll be instrumental in helping write that forestry title. There might be opportunities there, not only for more funding, but also for any number of bills we need to do to reform how we do forestry, give our communities more tools. So we've already got about 3-4 bills in the hopper on that we're working on with communities around the state, and a lot of those are based on ideas Michael has learned right here on the Western Slope from visiting with communities and getting out there on the ground. And he's been on the ground here in Durango, like I said, over in Pagosa. We visited Pagosa. One good idea that came out of that was let's put into, I'm sorry?
Only one?
I mean, there was like 8 good ideas that day. Only one has become statute so far. But we're working on the other 7. The one that became statute was, the folks there took Michael out into the forest right above Pagosa on Reservoir Hill there and said, hey, look, in this community, we've been able to use something called the Joint Chiefs Authority, where the chief of NRCS and the Forest Service are getting together to say, let's fund projects on both sides of the fence, private land and public land. And that way, you haven't got the mitigation done on one side, not the other, which is often a huge problem. So that's a great authority, but so far it had only been just an initiative within the Department of Agriculture. But Michael said, look, let's make that a statute. Let's crank up the funding for it. Let's triple the funding. And so he put that out there as a bill, working with the folks in Pagosa, the Upper San Juan Basin Headwaters Partnership, and we got that bill out there. And Michael was able to get it enacted into statute with a floor amendment when the bipartisan infrastructure law was going through the Senate. He took to the floor with a Republican colleague and said, hey, we want to amend the bill to add this in. It worked. We added it in, and now it's statute. So another good tool for forestry.
Hey, John.
Yes, sir.
Can you wrap it up?
Yeah.
We got 2 more.
I'm getting the hook here, so I'm gonna step aside. You guys know me, I can keep talking. There's a couple other things. I just say transportation funding for the bipartisan infrastructure law. I think we're gonna talk about that a lot more today. That money's flowing. If any local community is not working with their TPR on how and where that money is spent, they sure should be, because this is kind of a golden era for transportation funding now that we finally got the long chase, but never enacted bipartisan infrastructure law, which is a real achievement of this Congress. And it took a lot of leadership from folks like Senator Hickenlooper and Michael Bennett getting in there, rolling up their sleeves, doing the kind of work we did on the doors to get to a bipartisan agreement. And it's probably the signature achievement of this Congress that we've done that. Money for everything from broadband to transportation. Our Durango Airport just got $3 million from it just last week, which we're excited to see. So anyways, with that, I'll take the hook from Ray and I'll pass the mic.
Thank you, John.
Thanks, John. Next up, we have from Representative Lauren Boebert's office, Naomi Dobbs, who's the Southwestern Regional Director. So Naomi, thank you again for joining us and welcome to Club 20.
Thank you, Christian. Thank you. Good morning. This is my actually first time at Club 20. So thank you, Christian. And I'd like to start off also acknowledging Clarice Navarro, who is Congresswoman Boebert's district director, who is here also, and a more familiar face in Club 20, certainly. I have on the subject, I'm going to stick to the subjects that we're having our focus of today, but I do want to mention that Congresswoman Boebert's office was early this year contacted by the Dolores County Commissioners and was able to participate in some wording modification and help show her support also for the Dolores project that was just discussed. And of course, Congressman Boebert also has a forest bill, which is quite dynamic and has been very well received. We get to work with first responders and leaders in the community on that. And of course, I'd like to talk about water and energy and these other subjects as well, but those are for Rangeley. So I will stick to transportation and our other subjects. So on the subject of transportation, I have a handout on your tables there. It's an update, and on the back page are highlights from Representative Boebert as being one of the first elected officials to visit the scene when I-70 was shut down for over 16 days following a catastrophic mudslide. Representative Boebert led Colorado's bipartisan congressional delegation in securing millions of dollars in much needed emergency support. Additionally, she introduced the I-70 Detour Act, which does what it says. And it will provide I-70 detours to alleviate the burden of shutdowns on the communities that surround the I-70 corridor, and also to ensure that commerce for the western slope doesn't come to another screeching halt for every time I-70 shuts down. Specifically, this bill requires the Secretary of Transportation to identify and prioritize funding for identifying repairs and alternative routes to I-70 that will help reduce congestion for local business traffic, and also helps minimize the frustration for tourists that come to enjoy our outdoor recreation and don't want to sit on I-70 in a long line. So that is also helpful. Congresswoman Boebert has also introduced what's called the America's Infrastructure Modernization, or AIM Act, and all funds in that bill actually go towards infrastructure projects. The AIM Act would reallocate $650 billion from the $2.2 trillion of unspent COVID funds to build roads, bridges, airports, ports, and other real infrastructure projects that we need. These bills are important, and Representative Boebert does more than just legislation, though. Representative Boebert has also helped with letters and providing support for very important transportation projects, including support for farmers and ranchers that are pursuing funds through, and I hope I say this correctly, the San Luis Central Railroad Company's Consolidated Rail Infrastructure Safety Improvement, or CRISI, competitive grant program. Oh, that's a long one. And then also she's provided support for the Glenwood Springs South Bridge grant application to find a new bridge connection to provide a critical second access that is needed between State Highway 82 and the western side of the Roaring Fork River. She also supported the San Luis Valley Regional Airport's selection of Denver Air Connection to provide air service to Alamosa, and if successful, this effort will provide an economic boom for business and tourism. And on the subject of tourism and outdoor recreation, since being elected, Congresswoman Boebert has prioritized policies and to promote tourism and policies that help maintain access to outdoor recreation. Representative Boebert has been a champion for eliminating the federal 30-30 plan, which intends to lock up at least 30% of all lands and waters in the US by 2030. And in response, Representative Boebert has introduced a bill titled the 30-30 Termination Act, which plainly says what the bill is designed to do. Representative Boebert opposes restrictive land use designations and takes action to prevent land grabs and federal government grabs of our land, especially that's a problem here in Colorado. She also supports efforts for increased recreational land and water use. As a member of the Natural Resources Committee, Representative Boebert has led the fight against HR 803, and that is titled Protecting America's Wilderness and Public Lands Act, which sounds quite positive, but this bill would kill jobs, limit outdoor recreation, and prevent public access. It would also add 1.5 million acres to be designated as new wilderness. Representative Boebert spoke out against HR 803 at the House floor in February of 2021. Representative Boebert also recently sent a letter, and would you cue that up? I think the date on this is July 11th, if I'm not mistaken. She recently sent a letter to the National Park Service holding them accountable for unilaterally shutting down a business these past 2 years at the Elk Creek Marina in the Blue Mesa Reservoir.
I'm trying to find it.
That's
It was
okay.
up, but now it's not.
It's not really something to read. I just wanted to show it as an example because our representatives do more than just legislation. They actively support and are responsive to requests in the community to show support where you really only have to have this from the federal level. It's good to have someone to reach out that can take action on behalf. So keep that in mind. If you have a project or an issue that needs attention from the federal level, a grant that you're pursuing, and you would like Congresswoman Boebert to consider providing support, you can send that to our office and we'll take action quickly on these. They're a priority. So Congresswoman Boebert is doing quite a bit of work, different work. There's an example, and it's also something you can send if you would like to see this example. So you can kind of figure, hey, maybe I do have something similar to this. Brittany can send that out. And so again, this is an example of things that we do for the district, just more than just legislation. And these actively support tourism and visitors and residents in Colorado. And so I want to also thank, this being my first experience at Club 20, thank the board who has done a great job. I was expecting much more aerial conversation because these are big, meaty subjects that we're getting into. But the level of detail has been wonderful. These are great examples that your speakers have brought forward and very memorable. So thank you to the staff and to the board. And with that, I'll pass it off to our next speaker. Thank you.
Face to Club 20. We're so excited to have Miss Helen, and I'm going to say Katich. Amazing. That's like the highlight of my whole day. Helen joins us from United States Senator John Hickenlooper's office, and she's the new Western Colorado Regional Director. So please welcome Helen.
The day is young if pronouncing my last name correctly is the best
I
part.
take
of it.
my
We're gonna
small
have a
victories
great
where I
day.
can. Small victories.
Awesome. So I'm Helen Kadich. I'm with Senator Hickenlooper's office. It's really good to see you. And I'm sorry I missed you yesterday. I'm based out of Durango. Nice to have two Western Colorado directors based out of Durango, which is great. But I was just flying back from DC last night. So the senator directly sends his best to everybody. And I cannot say how grateful I am to live on the western slope of Colorado and in Southwest Colorado. We're so lucky to be able to do this work and to be able to live here and enjoy all of the benefits of being here together. So transportation and outdoor rec, right?
Tourism and outdoor rec, yeah.
Tourism and outdoor rec, just getting caught up. So a couple of quick things. One, it's always great to speak after John Whitney because he just goes through most of everything. So I have to keep it short. I will be speaking, I think, for the rest of my career about the monumental win of the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. I think it's November feels like lifetimes ago. And this was truly an unprecedented number of funding going into really important pieces to forestry, transportation, roads across the western slope, and it's really exciting to see that money start to get deployed now into our community. So I wanted to just kind of zoom back for just a moment here. On the transportation piece, a little bit over $181 billion this year for public transportation. There's a rural program specifically of $4.6 billion that provides capital planning and operations to states in rural communities where we know that a lot of our community members are dependent on public transportation. Airport infrastructure grants, this is $15 billion. DIA and Durango La Plata County Airport. So a total win for our local airport here. So just want to celebrate the work of our local folks here, making it easier to access Southwest Colorado and the region as a whole. I went in yesterday and we went through some of the phase planning of the Durango La Plata County Airport just recently. And it's really exciting to think about the transition of a really nice tent as half of our airport right now, becoming something really beautiful in the future. So yeah, it's great news. So congratulations to all of the leaders that supported that effort, and again to Senator Bennett and Senator Hickenlooper for really leading this bipartisan effort in the United States Senate. For the first time, we're seeing money go into electric vehicle charging stations. So $57 million. This was actually where the first piece of legislation was passed by Senator Hickenlooper, which is the Recharge Act, gives states the authority to consider rate designs for how charging stations go to make sure that they're accessible and equitable as we continue to make that transition moving forward. So really great work there. Tourism and outdoor rec, this is like Senator, this is what he loves to talk about. So I'll just translate that. Senator Hickenlooper, during his time as governor, opened just the second outdoor rec office for the state in the country. So state of Colorado and you all here have really been leading the charge on what the economic impact and what the local impact can be through outdoor recreation economy. So we all know that this is a multi-billion-dollar industry for our state. We all know that it's also putting a lot of pressure on the western slope now. So I think over the last several years, I cannot remember years anymore because COVID just confused me, I think. Over the last several years, we've been seeing more and more pressure, more and more folks coming up to the western slope and making home here. which makes sense. There's a reason why we're all here. It's beautiful and it's an amazing community. And it means that we're having some pressures put on it. So as Senator Hickenlooper likes to say, we've done an amazing job of supporting the outdoor rec economy. And now we need to make sure that we don't love it to death. So there's a couple of pieces that I just wanted to share here. One, we've been hearing from all over the Western Slope the pressures on affordable housing in our communities and the lack of supply there. Senator Bennett's office, alongside many of the folks that represent Southwest Colorado and the Western Slope as a whole, including I'm a mega fan of Chris Lopez's wife, Jen Lopez, who's in the back here, and CHAPA as a whole led a statewide housing policy group that we were able to hop on at the end there. So we're working off of a federal policy framework on how to increase supply and ensure affordable housing across the state. We're really taking a look at this in terms of housing supply in the Western Slope. So really want to support the efforts that so many folks in here are doing to make sure that we're continuing to build, continuing to make sure that there's affordable housing for our workforce and that folks are able to stay in our communities that we really need to have here, like teachers and our doctors even that are having trouble finding affordable housing. So this is happening in a few different ways. One is a home investment partnership. There's a self-help home ownership and rural capacity building program, community development block grants that we've been supporting, and NeighborWorks programs. We recently sent a letter to support a grant for Homes Fund here in Durango. And as an open invitation, as you all are looking at this affordable housing opportunities in your areas, we want to hear about what's working and we want to see how we can support on that federal nexus piece. So please get in touch with us. This is a very open and running and prioritized conversation within our office right now. Second is the wildfire piece, as we see more and more folks enjoying the outdoor rec economy in Colorado, also puts increased pressure on the wildfire front. John Whitney shared a little bit more about this, but we saw a phenomenal number come in through the Infrastructure and Jobs Act. I want to highlight, when was it? It was last Public Lands Day. Senator Hickenlooper was here. We had a roundtable with some of our collaborative forest groups in the area, and he just shared the Western Slope of Colorado is really leading the way in terms of how we are looking at managing our forests together and collaboratively. We're seeing that come in. USDA just announced $30 million for the landscape restoration in northern New Mexico and southern Colorado. So this is the Rio Chama Collaborative. $3 million every year for the next 10 years for on the ground forest management. We'll see more of those funds come in on the ground. So I think I'll just be talking about the Infrastructure and Jobs Act, as I said before, for many years to come, because we're going to continue to see how it impacts our community. Also just wanted to share, Commissioner, so phenomenal to see the work of the Dolores MCA. So congratulations. So exciting to see it introduced. I was with Senator Hickenlooper Wednesday. It was Wednesday. We were running through the basement of the Capitol building right before he was taking a vote and got to go into his little hideaway with him, which was so fun. And noticed that on the bottom of my boots was some mud from Montezuma County, I think in particular from my last tour there. But I was trekking into the US Capitol and being able to speak about the Dolores MCA and the impacts of that work. So we left a little bit of dirt that will impact from the Dolores MCA in the US Capitol, and really exciting to see that work go through. So inspiring bipartisan effort. IIJ is an inspiring bipartisan effort that really is beginning to make a difference on the ground for us. So I'm going to be quiet because I'm so excited to listen to you all for the rest of the day, but thank you so much for having me. Great to see you.
Before we start our first committee meeting of the day, just a couple of housekeeping items. Restrooms are out this door and around the corner to the right. Please use a microphone whenever you are addressing the room or asking a question of one of our speakers. We do have a number of folks joining us virtually on Zoom, and they cannot hear you unless you use a microphone. When you do use that microphone, they connect via Bluetooth to the system. So it takes 2 or 3 seconds after you push the on button for the microphone to actually connect to the system. So give it a second before you start speaking. And then once you're done speaking, turn that microphone off to avoid getting any feedback today. So I think with that, we do want to thank our lunch and venue sponsor, and I know Ray will thank them again, but Four Corners Material helped to sponsor our venue and our lunch today. So let's give them a big round of applause. With that, we'll turn it over to our wonderful Transportation Committee chairs to take it away.
Thank you, Christian. And first of all, I want to thank everybody. Welcome this morning. We have a very robust agenda for you. So we're going to try to start on time and finish on time so that we don't hold up tourism as they follow us. And as Christian said, again, I'd like to, first of all, thank our sponsors, Four Corners Materials, for sponsoring our meeting in Verigy. Oscar Rangel, raise your hand there in the middle of the room. Thank you, Oscar, for your sponsorship. We really appreciate, and your membership as well. And with that being said, Mike and I, my co-chair, which I'm honored to have working with, and so welcome, thank you. And so I'd like to we'd also like to recognize our Transportation Advisory Committee. We think it's very important. You know, there's a lot of ways you can get involved in Club 20, and this is just one way. So our advisory committee members are Sue Hansen, who is here today, Rachel Richards, who is here, Cindy Dozier, Kathy Hall is with us today. Kathy Hall is the chair of the Transportation Commission for the state of Colorado and representing Western Colorado. So thank you, Kathy. Joe Hostetler, Terry Binder is here, my past co-chair and a long-standing Club 20 member, and Shauna Krieger. So thank you, guys. We really appreciate you guys working with us and keeping us in line and helping us make our decisions. I also want to recognize our staff. You know, we can't do what we're doing with these resolutions without the help of our staff. So, you know, Christian and Brittany and Julia, thank you for what you do for Club 20. We really do appreciate your efforts. And with that being said, I'm going to turn this over to my co-chair, Mike, and we're going to go read the format, and then we'll jump into the agenda. Mike.
So we're going to start first real quickly, just to remind everybody of the meeting guidelines for today. So thank you for coming to the Club 20 policy meetings. In accordance with our bylaws, we ask that only Club 20 members participate and vote on matters of policy development. If you're interested in becoming a Club 20 member, please see a member of our staff for further information. Discussion is open to members and guests and is a critical part of our committee meetings. When asking a question or making a comment, please use a microphone and speak loudly so everyone can hear you. And do not forget, when you turn on the microphone, you got to wait a second or two. For those seated in the front of a tabletop microphone, again, please do not turn on your microphone until the committee chair has acknowledged you, and then turn off your microphone once you are finished speaking. For those in the back of the room, Club 20 staff will be walking around with a microphone for you to use. So I will now ask Brittany to identify who has joined the meeting virtually.
Okay, online we have Greg Fulton, Janet Farmer, Jolene Hotsettler, Kelly Haggerty, Melanie Worley, Representative Perry Will, Senator Ray Scott, Shelley Shaw, and Terry House.
And then Brittany, I'm just going to start with you and ask you to start the introductions through the room.
Yes, I am Brittany Dixon, and I'm the Policy and Outreach Representative for Club 20.
Kent Holsinger with Holsinger Law. I am Vice Chair of Colorado's Aeronautical Board.
Good morning, I'm David Elaine. I'm Director of CDOT's Division of Aeronautics.
Steve Harris, Durango.
Good morning, Sue Hansen, Montrose County Commissioner and Club 20 Executive Club.
Nancy Fishering, Co-Chair of Public Lands Natural Resource and Club 20 member.
John Fishering from Montrose, Colorado.
Morning, I'm Meredith Fadler. I'm the Deputy Director of the Colorado Business Committee for the Arts.
Good morning, Mary Jo Houlihan, Archuleta County. I am also the co-chair of the Tourism Subcommittee.
Lois Dunn, Mesa County Representative on Club 20 Board and also Government Affairs for Transition Realtors.
Good morning, Steve Garcher, Dolores County Commissioner and member of Club 20.
James Lambert, Club 20 board member. This is my wife.
Good morning, Barbara McLaughlin, I'm House District 59 representative. Good morning, Terry Binder, former co-chair of Transportation Club 20 and resident of Denver.
Chris Lopez with Colorado Housing and Finance Authority, Community Relationship Manager for Southwest Colorado.
Sydney Zink, retired CPA and former member of the Transportation Commission and good friend of Kathy Hall.
Hi, I'm Ann McCoy Harold, probably the longest serving member and whatever of Club 20. Thank you for being here. And I am totally envious of your socks.
She always observes the most interesting things. I guess that's why I hang out with her. I'm Kathy Hall and I'm the past chair of Club 20. I'm also CDOT Commissioner for District 7 and happy to be here as well today.
Good morning. My name is Rachel Richards. I'm Aspen City Council and former Pickens County Commissioner and serve on the executive board of Club 20. Thank you.
I'm Helen Kate with Senator Higley for his office.
Naomi Dobbs with Congresswoman Bobert's office.
Mark Wayne Jeffries, Platte County, Agriculture and Aviation Advocate.
My name is Oscar Rengel with Verity, and I'm a member of Club 20.
Shauna Grieger, I am the director of Western Colorado Contractors Association, member of Club 20, and used to be staff member of Club 20.
Brad McLeod, Mesa County. I am the area manager for Western Colorado for Xcel Energy, and I am your current chair for Club 20 as well. So on a personal note, thank you all very much for taking the time out of your day yesterday and today to be a part of these policy meetings. We can't obviously do this without your input. You're as strong as our membership is. So thank you all for being here. Thanks to our great hosts that we've had here in Brandon.
Julie Constant, Region 5 Transportation Director for CDOT.
Mike Goolsby, former CDOT Region 3 Director, and I say that with lots of joy. And new member of Club 20.
Hello, Brad Blake, former La Plata County Commissioner and candidate for La Plata County Commissioner.
Matt Schuler from Jackson County, owner and editor of the Jackson County Star, your favorite newspaper. Steve Reynolds, a former chairman of Club 20, the current co-chair of the Healthcare Committee, and from Glenwood Springs.
I'm Kathy Fackler, a Club 20 member from Durango.
All right, thank you very much. I'm going to jump off script for 1 second because there's some incredibly influential people here in this building and have represented the state of Colorado and particularly the Western Slope for many years. Two ladies in particular come into mind for me personally, and that is Kathy Hall and Sydney Zink. Transportation. They've been so influential for the Western Slope and particularly guiding CDOT and making sure that CDOT does not forget about the Western Slope. And I just want to thank you both for all your time and effort. And it goes well beyond CDOT. You're engaged in so many boards and groups and helping anything that happens on the Western Slope. So thank you very much for doing it.
Very sweet. Thank you.
Lastly, don't want to forget our venue sponsors again, Four Corners Materials. Very thankful that they stepped up to help cover the cost for this meeting this week and help offset the cost for the meals that you're going to have here. So very thankful for that. And then also for Verigy again today. Thank you, sir, for your donation to help with the committee sponsorship. So that is wonderful. The reception sponsorship last night was with Centura Health. A lot of you went to that last night. It was very enjoyable. Thankful that we got a little bit of rain. It helped cool it off a little bit. It's a little warm. And then just, thank you everybody for coming and making this such a great gathering this week.
Thank you, Mike. Just a couple other things before we get started. I just want to remind everybody that transportation is what started Club 20 back in 1953 and will be celebrating 70 years next year. So I think that's monumental. And then the other thing real quick, I have to make a plug for membership. So just a couple benefits as a potential member and as a member of Club 20. You can receive up-to-date information on key issues affecting Western Colorado in the form of monthly email updates and newsletters, participating in policy committees that guide local and state elected leaders on Western Slope through annual trips to Denver and biannual trips to Washington, D.C., voting at county caucus meetings to decide who will represent you on the Club 20 board and directors every 2 years, being eligible to vote at all Club 20 policy committee meetings, having problems solved or questions answered as a courtesy of the Club 20 staff, and networking opportunities with a diverse group of individuals, elected officials, and business folk from all across Colorado. So if you're interested and you're here and not a member, please contact our staff or myself as membership chair. We'd be happy to have you on board. So thank you. So with that being said, I'd like to introduce our first speakers. We are honored today to have with us Dave Ulane, the Director of the Division of Aeronautics for the state of Colorado, and Ken Holsinger, who is also on the Colorado Aeronautical Board and one of our representatives, one of two representatives on the Western Slope that represents us on with aviation. So welcome to both of you. Now I'll turn it over to you guys.
Thanks, sir. Wait 2 seconds. 2 seconds, maybe. Boy, she's doing that just for the record. My socks, I'm not that limber in my old age. Denver International Airport socks. So there you go. That's what she's talking about. That worked. Can you all hear me without a microphone if I talk loud enough?
No, the Zoom.
Oh, got it. Thank
So
you.
we might need to,
Here,
might
use
be
that
able to
microphone work.
walk around with this, yeah. That microphone works.
Perfect. How about that? That better? Excellent. Thank you. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to come back here. I think it's been at least 3 years since I've had the privilege of speaking to you all at Club 20, thanks to the lovely pandemic. So again, Ray, thank you for the opportunity to come give you an update on what's going on with state aeronautics. I figured I ought to suck up by putting up a picture of a Western Slope airport. So, anybody know which airport that is? You're right. Yeah, yes, no, that's good. That's awesome. Well, I appreciate it. Go ahead, next slide, please. Well, as a kid that grew up in Littleton and spent all my young days hanging on the fence at the old Stapleton Airport, I am probably the luckiest guy in Colorado because I get to do all of the aviation things that I've loved since I was literally a little kid, and I get to do it every day across the state where I grew up, learn to fly, cut my professional tees. So it's really an honor to be here and to work for CDOT. I love my job. This is what we do. There's 3,000 people or so, I think, that work for CDOT. There's 9 of us that don't do surface transportation. And I think you'd be hard pressed to find another group of people anywhere within public service that are more passionate, more dedicated to what we do. This is what we do, our mission, our vision. I won't read that to you, but in essence, what our division exists to do is to support aviation and airports across the state as part of our multimodal transportation system. And the way we do that within CDOT is pretty interesting and unique. We're like no other division really within state government, really. So next slide, please. What's really cool about us is as a division director, I don't actually report to Shoshana Liu as the CDOT director. I'm actually accountable, and our division is accountable to the Colorado Aeronautical Board. And that's a 7-member type 1 board, just like the Transportation Commission. It's appointed by the governor. This is the group that establishes our policy. They decide what we focus on. They have jurisdiction over the discretionary part of our budget that I'll talk about in a little bit. But We were created in 1991. Colorado was the very last state in the United States that had a dedicated aeronautics division. And thanks to the vision and leadership of Senator Lou Entz and Governor Roy Romer at the time, they realized nothing was happening to fund and support aviation and airports beyond a little bit of money that was coming out of DOLA. So our division was created way back almost 33 years ago, and this board and the way it's been structured is just fantastic. As Ray had mentioned, the way it's set up, we have two members that come from the Western Slope. That's Mr. Holsinger from Jackson County. He's our current vice chair. And then Ken Mampa is our current chair. He's the airport director at Telluride. We have two Eastern Eastern Plains members, Daniel Malia from Burlington. He's the airport director there as our new Eastern Plains representative. And then we also have Chaz Tedesco. He's an Adams County commissioner as our other Eastern Plains representative. One represents airports, that's Steve Lee from Denver International, and one represents pilot associations, Trimby Zavo, she's a Learjet pilot for International Jet, and then one at-large person, and that is a larger than life character. If you've ever met Mark Van Tine, a guy with a really cool mustache, he's the former president and CEO of Jeppesen, which is one of the largest aviation data providers in the world. So we've got a great board. I'm really lucky. I'm very lucky to know Ray. When I joined the division about 7 years ago, we were in a tough spot. Ray became chair the same time I got hired on, and together over the next 3 years, I had the privilege of working with you, sir, to help get us straightened out. And I really enjoyed working with you and miss you on the board. But anyway, thank you for all you've done to help us get back where we are. So thank you, Ray. You've been a great board. So that's it. So this is our airport system. You know, we have 76 public use airports in Colorado. 10 of those are privately owned, but open to the public. Our state statute doesn't really allow us to engage in those airports, so we really focus on the other 66. I heard mention last night of Rangeley, pretty interesting. We actually have 2 seaplane bases in Colorado, which is pretty interesting. One is just outside of Rangeley on Kinney Reservoir, so it's kind of cool. If you ever have any trivia questions, 2 seaplane bases in the state. So, kind of cool. I'm a seaplane pilot. I've never flown in Colorado, but anyway, maybe at some point I'll get a chance to do it, but it's kind of hard to find a seaplane here. So that is kind of neat. But we work with all of these airports statewide. They all have a very important role in our statewide aviation system, whether it's air ambulance evacuation. I heard wildfire being talked about quite a bit. One of the biggest things our small airports support is wildfire mitigation and wildfire management and wildfire suppression. We've all seen the small single engine air tankers that are pretty ubiquitous in Colorado. Those can operate off of any of these airports. And so that's really one of the key benefits. A lot of these smaller airports like up in Craig provide when there's fire, they can go to that airport and serve those. So we really work hard, not just to support commercial service airports like Grand Junction and Durango, but all of the airports across Colorado. So we're also funded, not only are we governed a little bit differently, but we're funded pretty differently too. Our division is funded only by the 3 state aviation fuel taxes collected in Colorado. We don't get federal money, we don't get CDOT money, we don't get a general fund allocation. The best part about that is I don't have to go and submit a budget to the state legislature. We're continuously appropriated by these 3 taxes, which continuously roll in. Guys like Kent buy fuel, and airlines like United buy fuel. So what's really interesting about Colorado is that here the airlines are not exempt from paying state aviation fuel tax. And you know, one of the things I've got to give props to Governor Romer and Senator Entz for is the way they set us up. Our biggest fuel tax is the 2.9% state sales tax, which applies to jet fuel, including that purchased by the airlines. So you can see where most of our revenue comes from. Now, the thing that makes it challenging for us is that our biggest source of revenue comes from a tax that is not only based on how much fuel is sold, but on what price it's sold at. So it's pretty amazing how our revenues can go like this based on the price of fuel and how much is sold. So for the fiscal year that ended just a couple of weeks ago, our whole revenue for that year was about $42–43 million. We'll wait and see how that flushes out. But look where it was in 21 during the pandemic when nobody was flying. We had $17 million. So it's amazing how we have to really work hard to manage our swing and how we do that. So that's pretty interesting. We also have a 4 cent per gallon excise tax on non-airline jet fuel. Yeah, Rachel.
Just wondering, what are the refunds and the
I'll get to that. Yeah, I'll get to that. So we also have, if you're a non-airline jet fuel owner, you pay 4 cents a gallon also, in addition to the 2.9 sales tax. And then if you're a small piston engine pilot like Kent and I, you'll pay 6 cents a gallon. So all told, like I said, for FY22, we're going to pull in about $42 million. Constitutionally, we're really lucky. Aviation fuel tax is dedicated to aviation purposes. It's protected. It can't be stolen like it can be in other states. We're really lucky about the way we're set up. Now, the way it goes back out the door is dictated by state statute. To your question, Counselor, what, if we can go back real quick, I'm sorry.
I thought that was.
I'll keep talking while she's doing that. Right off the bat, 2/3 of all of the fuel tax revenue collected is dispersed back to the airport where the fuel was sold. And airports can use that money to do whatever they want, as long as they use it on airport for airport purposes. You can't ship it downtown. You can't do something else with it. So you don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out where most of our revenue comes from, that 93.2%. 80% of our division's overall revenue comes from DIA. Now, DIA also gets the biggest chunk of money back every month. Every month we process disbursements back to the airport based on the amount of fuel that was sold and all of that. So again, that's money they can use for whatever. Now at Denver, it's a pretty small amount of money and their huge budget, but for a small airport like Craig or Walden, it can be a big difference in making some improvements and doing things at that airport. The 3%, that's our administrative costs, salaries. We own a small building at the Colorado Air and Spaceport in Watkins. That's where our office is, the former Front Range Airport. Keeping the lights on at that place, doing building maintenance, things like that. We run very lean. Just like the rest of CDOT, we can't spend more than 5% of our total revenue on administrative costs, but we take pride in being even way below that. Now, the 30% is the discretionary piece that under state statute, our board has got extremely broad latitude to do some very cool things with. And I'll talk a little bit about some of those because we're doing things without hyperbole that a lot of other states just can't or don't do. So the biggest thing that we spend that discretionary piece on is what we call our CDAG program, our Colorado Discretionary Aviation Grant Program. This is funding that we provide to airports to do capital improvements, purchase equipment, do planning, conduct environmental studies, and do all those kinds of things. We leverage our money with the federal money, and this is a remarkable slide. This is really cool. As you heard about from our congressional representatives, there's a lot of extra money out there for airports right now. And we have really worked hand in glove, like we always have, with the FAA to leverage our money with all of this new federal money to really get some amazing things going on all across the state. Kent and I had the opportunity when we both arrived yesterday to meet with Tony Vicari, the airport director here, and get briefed on what they're doing with their terminal building and the $3.2 million that received to help with that. But here's what's kind of cool. So this year, our board approved $8.5 million worth of state aviation grant funds. Doesn't sound like a lot of money. My counterparts in Montana that have twice as many airports had $700,000 across 130 airports. So we do pretty well here in Colorado. We really do pretty well. And if you look at it, most of that funding, 5.5 million, went to small airports that didn't get federal funding. Our board is very passionate about supporting the small general aviation airports either don't get federal money, or if they do, it's a very small amount. What we also do though, is we also will match and help airports match their 10% on federal money. We'll pay half of their 10% up to $250,000 a year. So here's what happened this year. We had $5.5 million of just state and local grants with no federal money. We plugged $2.5 million into some federal funding. And then thanks to the bipartisan infrastructure law, airports are starting to ramp up for that. We didn't see a lot of match for that, just $500,000. But here's the cool story. I don't know if you all got good vision plans with your employer, but that says $99,430,000. That's 1 year of funding for 36 airports in Colorado, not including Denver International. We don't engage with their funding because they're such a big animal. It's just they do their own thing. That's the highest single year investment in airports in our division's 33-year history. So we really appreciate our congressional delegation helping bring that extra money to Colorado. We've been very happy that we've recovered so fast in Colorado that we've got the funding to help communities match that. And we really appreciate everybody's support with that. It's been fantastic. The cool thing about this, we did our statewide aviation system plan, just like CDOT has a STIP, we have the same plan for aviation. The biggest unmet need was small commercial air service terminals like what you've got here in Durango. They're eligible for FAA money, but only FAA discretionary money. And terminal buildings in the FAA's scheme are pretty low on the priority list compared to runways and taxiways and some of those kinds of things. What our airports in Colorado have really done with the IIJA funds, they've really started to invest tens of millions of dollars in terminal buildings, which has really taken some pressure off capital plans, and it's really making things better. Hayden, Durango, Montrose, Aspen, Loveland, Eagle, all of these small commercial service airports all have big terminal projects underway thanks to the funding that's being allocated to this program. So it's been pretty exciting to see how all that's going to work here in Colorado. But we're also tasked with a couple other things under state law. In addition to supporting infrastructure, we have to support aviation education. So we do a lot of very cool things with that. For years, we have supported airport internships. Durango has an intern. I met her yesterday. She's funded with a grant from CDOT Aeronautics. It helps pay her salary. So she's learning all about what it takes to run an airport. It's kind of cool. Of our 9 people on our division staff, 5 of us started our careers as interns at Centennial Airport. So we're very passionate about that program. We've got interns at 8 airports across the state right now. And you can find those folks all over the country doing very cool things. Thanks to our recovery financially this year, for the first time in 8 years, we also had enough money to allocate $400,000 to aviation workforce development grants, which we are getting to ready to contract now to things like Ames Community College, Wings Over the Rockies Museum, to help them develop the next generation of mechanics and pilots and air traffic controllers and all these people we need to keep our system moving. From an aviation safety standpoint, annually we publish an aeronautical chart and a state airport directory for our pilots to use. We're one of the few states that does that. Still, paper's great. Everybody's using electronics. I know Ken does when he flies, I do, but paper still rules and the batteries never wear out. So we love this for pilots. Pilots love that. But one of the very cool things, to go back to, the way we're structured and the cool things we can do with regards to our aviation safety initiative. One of the things our division did back in 2000 is we stood up a network of high altitude aviation weather stations in the mountains. It's always weather at airports. You can always get a weather report at an airport. But when guys like Kent are flying from Centennial over here in his small airplane, he wants weather information at the top of the mountains. That's where he's concerned about winds and clouds and all those kinds of things. We realized there was a gap. We were the first state to have high altitude weather observation systems in Colorado. Any state in the United States, we now have 13 of them at places like Wolf Creek Pass, Berthoud Pass, Monarch Pass. We own and operate those. It's the only infrastructure we actually own and operate are those systems. We don't own airports. We don't do any of that. Well, one of the things we always got asked for by our pilots is, well, the raw data is cool. I would really love to see what's going on up there, see what the weather's actually doing at the top of Wolf Creek Pass or at Telluride Airport, what's actually happening now. Well, for years, you can go to the next slide. Oh, sorry, it's got an animation. I forgot about that. For years, the FAA up in Alaska, because of the incredibly challenging way people have to operate up there, they had a very big network of aviation weather cameras in Alaska. But Alaskans, like including the FAA up there, they like to do their own thing. They really didn't want to do anything outside of Alaska. And there's a bunch in Canada that NAV Canada owns and operates. But about 3 years ago, I met the guy that runs the Alaska Weather Camera Program. He was down in Denver for a meeting with the National Weather Service and got introduced. And I said, we would really love to have cameras in Colorado. He said, we're ready to do cameras outside of Alaska. I said, well, I want us to be the first state to do it. 14 months after that conversation, we stood up the first 13 weather systems. They were installed, funded, everything. We did it with our money. We actually gave the FAA our division's money. They came down from Alaska and put all this stuff in. We did our first 13 in 2020. In the middle of the pandemic, that group traveled down in 2021, put in at 10 additional airports. And next week, they show up again to do 20 more airports, including Durango. So in the course of 3 years, we went from having no aviation weather cameras in Colorado to 43, and we did all of those for about $800,000. So When I have a hairy ass idea, I can go to the board and say, I got this crazy idea, let's go do something cool. And they say, sure, here's the money, and we go do it. So I don't have a lot of bureaucracy, we don't have a lot of BS we got to put up with, and we can do cool things like this that I can never prove it, but I know that these will save somebody's life. And that's one of the things that we exist to do is former CDOT director Shane Labatt said, make people's lives better, save lives. You know, so that's what we're helping to do. So I love this story. It's really cool. They're open to the public. I keep meaning to put the website link. It's weathercams.faa.gov. And if you go to the next slide, I'll show you what it does. It's pretty cool. This is the one at Sunlight Mountain, just above the Glenwood Springs Airport by the ski area. What it does is for each of those four directions, you can see up at the top, you can see what it looks like today, right now, and then you can see what it would look like on a clear day with some things pointed out to kind of give you an idea of what visibility is. You can go back, you can loop those, and it doesn't do video, you can't move them around because it's pretty simple. All these have cell connections, you can't really do a lot with them. But anyway, that is what one of those cameras looks like. This was actually, our camera was one of the first notifications of the Grizzly Creek fire had started. They saw the smoke on one of our cameras. Somebody was watching these. These are being used for other things too. I've learned that climatologists are measuring snowpack. They've developed algorithms to pull the pictures down to see how the snow's melting. Cool. And a lot of outdoor recreationalists are using these too to go see what the weather's doing before they go back in the high country. So anyway, kind of a cool thing that we get to do that we're really proud of. There they are. You can see the map. The blue cameras are where they are. Again, most of those on the Eastern Plains are happening next week. So by the end of August, those will all be up and running. So we're really proud of that program. But what I'm also really excited about too, and I'm about ready to wrap up here, is aviation is about to go through the most fundamental change that it has since the late 1950s and the advent of commercial jets. Right now in development, you go ahead and click that a couple more times. We are going to see an amazing transition in the aircraft world, like you're seeing in the vehicle world, away from fossil fuels to electric, hydrogen fuel cells, hybrid, all kinds of cool technology coming down the pipe. We've got a lot to figure out. An electric airplane takes a hell of a lot more electricity, as I was talking to Brad about last night, than a Tesla does. And how do we build the infrastructure? How do we fund the infrastructure to get this technology to come to Colorado first? We like doing stuff first. One of the things we're in the process of right now, we're finalizing a contract with the National Renewable Energy Lab, and of all things NASA. I never thought I'd work with NASA. NASA is going to do a very detailed intra-state mobility model for us to show where people are moving in Colorado by vehicle and by plane. We're going to use that information to plug it into how these new airplanes will operate to see what opportunities we have within the state to electrify our airports and get them ready for this next generation of airplanes. Can't afford to do all 66. Doesn't make sense to do all 66, but if we can identify where people want to move, these new kind of 9-seat airplanes are going to change the way people move, and you won't have to go to a commercial service airport like Durango. The beautiful part about 9 seats is you can fly from one non-TSA airport to another non-TSA airport and not have to go through security screening. So all of a sudden, if you think about it, and I think of Denver, it might be feasible to have airline service between Boulder Municipal Airport and Centennial Airport as a commuter shuttle without all the BS of going through a big commercial service airport. But we've got to get the infrastructure in place for these electric airplanes to be able to do that. So our division and that partnership with NREL is going to take a look at that. We're the first state in the nation to be looking at electric airplanes this way. And we really want to be ready. They're 10, 15 years down the road, but we have to change funding streams. We have to change policy. We have to change eligibility for federal grants. We have to change airport infrastructure. We have to build terminal buildings. There's all these pieces that have to go together. You heard me say our division's funded by fossil fuel taxes. We're going to have to figure out a different way for us to get money and still do all the cool things we do with electric airplanes or with hydrogen. One of the other cool ones for larger airplanes is hydrogen fuel cell that generates the electricity to run the motor rather than a battery. You're going to see that kind of technology with like a regional airline size, like a 76-seat airplane. So how do we get hydrogen in Colorado? How do we do that? We want to lead the way nationally. So we're excited about that. That's one of the things we're looking at. There's a perfect example. When I worked at the Aspen-Pitkin County Airport, this airplane flew in on Frontier. It's a 76-seat turboprop. commuter airplane, Alaska Airlines has donated one to a company called Zero Avia, and they're test flying it today. They're actually flying it today. It runs on hydrogen. And so this is the stuff that's coming. Got a lot of work yet, but we need to get ready for this. Basically, what you do is just plug in a hydrogen fuel cell in the back and you go. That's it. So anyway, we have to work on this. This is going to be cool. Sustainable aviation fuel. I love this because it's taxed just like regular fuel, but you've probably read about this. There's a big push nationally, internationally. Part of making aviation net neutral by 2050 on a carbon perspective. That's the stated goal of airlines, business aviation, general aviation. Sustainable aviation fuel is a huge part of that. That's fuel that's not brewed from fossil or from petroleum stocks. It's manufactured out of waste products, biomass, forest waste, waste oil, and it has a far lower carbon footprint than fossil fuel. Problem is, there's not enough production facility. There's not enough raw feedstock to make it yet. It needs to be scaled up. You can get it at 3 airports right now, Aspen, Eagle, and Telluride, but it's about twice the cost of a traditional gallon of jet fuel. So there's a lot of folks that sell it. I talk with our board chair all the time. People are making a choice to use this fuel. And the more people that do that, the more it creates a market for it, the more production will happen and all of that. So we're going to be working with Governor Polis's office, and I think we'd love to have a conversation with our federal congressional delegation. What kind of tax incentives can you create to spur the development of sustainable aviation fuel in Colorado? And again, I love it because we still get the revenue for it. It's taxed just like regular jet fuel. So that's kind of cool stuff coming down the pike too. Lastly, I'll just talk very quickly about another cool partnership we have ongoing with the Federal Aviation Administration, and that's our remote air traffic control tower project at the Northern Colorado Regional Airport up in Loveland. Who's heard of this by chance or remembers me talking about it years ago? Cool. So everybody thinks when an airport, like let's say Durango, needs an air traffic control tower, you get busy enough, you need a tower, you call the FAA, you say, come build me a tower. It works that way if you're DIA. It doesn't work that way for any other airport. The FAA will say, you guys figure out how to build a tower, and it's up to you to pay for it. Towers are expensive, $13, $14 million. Once you build it, you can't really move it. They cost a lot to maintain. They cost a lot to operate. Tower goes away. You can't repurpose it for anything else. So one of the cool technologies that was actually pioneered in Europe, and you go to the next slide, is a remote air traffic control tower. What it does is it uses an array of cameras that emulates the view of you looking out of a building that's 100 feet above the ground, but it does it and it puts it into a room like this. Go to the next slide. This is what the control panel looks like at Loveland right now. It's under testing. We're undergoing. We are working to develop this. The cool thing about this is, and they're already doing this in Scandinavia, you can, from one room, you could have multiple setups like this and control traffic from 3 or 4 different airports from one centralized center. It's cheaper, it's more efficient, it's more scalable. And for an airport like Durango, where you might need a part of the year, but not all of the year, you basically sit down and you log into your computer and you start controlling traffic at a Durango or a Hayden or a Montrose or another airport that doesn't have air traffic control tower. This did absolutely nothing during COVID, right? The same week that COVID hit, March 20th of 2020 was the same week all of the FAA folks were supposed to come out from DC to start doing our testing. They didn't travel for 2 years. That finally broke free here a couple of months ago. We're kind of back on track. We've talked with Senator Hickenlooper and our congressional delegation. He's been very helpful on the aviation side. Previous FAA administration didn't have a lot of affinity for this, to be quite direct, but we're hoping that Bill Washington, the CEO of Denver International Airport, and the new FAA nominee, we're going to meet with him in a couple of weeks and help hopefully get him on track with getting this, because this is the future of aircraft for FAA. It's cheaper, it's faster, it's going to be safer. Airports will get air traffic if they couldn't afford it. We've got to get this going. There's no reason we should be behind everybody else in the world. It's because nobody at FAA is excited about it, because it's working everywhere. It's working, it's proven. We're not the first in the world, but we are one of just 2 in the United States doing this right now. So we love this project too. That's really about it. With that, I really appreciate it. Ray, would you like me to talk about PFAS real quick?
Just a little bit, yeah. Can you touch on it, please?
Who's familiar with PFAS? PFAS is the acronym. All right, that's good. So for the rest of you, polyfluoroalkyl substances. I'm no chemist. I'm an airport dork. But I did spend a number of years as an aircraft rescue firefighter. And PFAS are chemicals that do amazing things. It's in food wrappers. It's one of the things that makes Gore-Tex waterproof but breathable. It's one of the reasons their eggs don't stick to your pan. It's one of the reasons firefighting foam works so well. PFAS is a chemical that's found in firefighting foam. And it is really effective at smothering a jet fuel fire. Problem is, when those chemicals get into the groundwater, they're very problematic and they don't go away. And so what we've seen in Colorado, particularly in Colorado Springs Fountain area, Peterson Air Force Base used to have a firefighting training center. For a long time, when I was a firefighter, we used actual foam. They don't do that anymore, but that foam would get into the groundwater. And if you've read anything about what's going on down in Fountain, they had problems with their municipal water supply. So this has become a national issue, and it's really focused on firefighting foam that's required by the federal government for airports like Durango to use. So the airport's in a tough spot. They're like, well, this stuff is horrible, but we have to use it. The FAA is requiring us to use it. There's no other alternative yet. There's one coming very quickly. And so the state has implemented a lot of regulations to try to minimize PFAS in Colorado. They've been very, very respectful of the airport community, realizing that there's not a lot of options right now, but I think within the next 6 months, you're going to see some suitable alternatives. And then Colorado Department of Public Health and the Environment has a program where they will buy back for $40 a gallon. They will buy back PFAS foam from fire departments or airports that have it, and then they will figure out how to dispose of it later. That's a pretty damn good deal, in my book, as a former airport director. So we're going to look at ways at how our division can potentially help airports acquire this new firefighting foam. You have to have, a jet fuel fire, you can't just spray water on it, it doesn't work. So we're going to work hard with that. We did a very cool statewide initiative. We were only the second state in the country a couple of years ago to provide all of our commercial service airports with little carts. When you're a commercial service airport like Durango, you have to prove to the FAA that your foam works and that it meets the spec. And the only way you used to be able to do that was to actually spray it into a container, and some of it would get on the ground. Well, we actually bought all of our commercial service airport carts where they can do that testing, and it just runs the foam right back into the truck. And that keeps it from doing that. So we were only the second state to do that. We're proud of that initiative. So anyway, that's kind of up on PFAS. It's really a commercial service airport issue, but there are solutions on the horizon that I think are going to be good for airports and good for the environment.
All right, thank you, Dave. Let's give him a round of applause, please. I think we might have just a little bit of time for Q&A, but before I do that, Kent, I want to give you an opportunity to say anything while you're here.
Sure, thanks, Commissioner. Just thanks to the leadership of Commissioner Beck and Dave. The Division of Aeronautics is the most passionate and one of the most well-run divisions in state government, in my humble opinion. It's a great honor to get to serve on the Aeronautical Board as Vice Chair. I've dreamt about being a pilot for my entire life. And by sheer luck, having worked on the Western Slope and all corners of Colorado and the West, I became a pilot for my business and have visited airports in every corner of the state, in 15 states and one foreign country to do so. And our airports are such an amenity to our communities, and it's so important for moving people, moving goods, for firefighting, for medical purposes. They're just such a terrific benefit, and it's an honor to get to do the work we do.
Thank you, Kent. And I want to go to Freddie, questions on Zoom first.
Yes. So our first question comes from Shelley Shaw. And she asks, what happens on the remote tower when power goes out or cameras malfunction? And are there planes? And there are planes in the air.
That's a great question. And it's nothing different than today when a regular air traffic control tower might have to be evacuated because of fire or something else. Everybody thinks Colorado has 66 public use airports. Guess how many have air traffic control towers? 9. So if you're not a pilot, you probably think it's just chaos and mayhem and everybody's just doing all kinds of crazy stuff. But there's actually very prescriptive procedures to operate with at what they call a non-towered airport. And so any towered airport, be it DIA or Loveland or any other airport, what they call is ATC 0. That means that the air traffic control services are not available. It reverts back to a non-towered airport. pilots go back to their training on how to announce themselves on the radio, enter the traffic pattern. That would get pretty challenging at a busy airport like a Centennial, but all of those procedures already exist today. And indeed, we've actually tested some of those at FNL on purpose to see how they work and they work fine. Great question.
And then there's one more, well, I have two on Zoom, but we could do one more on Zoom and then see if anybody in the room has one. So Greg, why don't you go ahead?
Thank you. Hey, I got the presentation. This is Greg Full of the Colorado Medicare. I appreciated the presentation. I did want to mention that, you know, Colorado, and we had worked with the petroleum marketers, and we actually did assessed on ourselves in terms of the hazardous material transport side to actually address PFAS, okay, in terms of this, have funding that goes to CDPHE, and also end up having a portion of those funds that would go to the Colorado State Patrol for hazardous material cleanup, and even a portion of that fee that goes to CDOT. And in some cases on the CDOT end of it, it wasn't only to help in terms of the hazardous material response sort of things, but we had looked at trying to end up doing efforts, which we've been working with CDOT to reduce, you know, help in terms of reducing runaway truck incidents and other efforts actually on I-70 and other corridors, actually, especially in the passes there. So I did want to mention, I think Colorado's out in front on some of those items like that. I know on our end of it, we take it very seriously, and just wanted to put that out there. But thank you very much for the opportunity.
Thanks, Greg. And I have to tell Greg and his membership, you know, one of the things Colorado does not have benefit of is airports on pipelines. Colorado Springs and Denver International are the only two airports that exist directly on pipelines. And without the trucking industry, airports like Durango and Aspen, Eagle, and every other small commercial service airport would not have fuel. And so we really value the contributions of our trucking industry to keeping our airports running, because airplanes don't fly too well without fuel.
Okay, questions in the room? Go ahead.
Few seconds, like we were told. Naomi Dobbs with Congresswoman Bobert's office. Dave, thank you so much for this. The level of detail was exactly what I was referencing before. Such big subjects, but extremely helpful details. And I have a question that follows up on Shelley Shaw's question. I'm wondering if Brittany, it's possible if you could go back to the slide to show the kind of remote tower, or the tower with the multiple cameras. I'd like to see that again. And if you could please repeat what the comparison was of a stationary tower versus this new model. And I also want to tell you, since you weren't here yesterday, this is very reflective of the kind of innovation that they were sharing on use of technology for the health systems, kind of a similar scenario. So can you please show that again? I didn't get my camera picture of it quick enough. The one prior to that with the actual tower.
Sure. And so one of the things that's interesting about ours is the first in the world with a distributed camera system. So in Colorado, because of our altitude, our runways here, we always joke with my counterparts down at Flatlanders, they're longer, better, and bigger because they have to be here in Colorado. So the one I'll contrast with the other remote control tower project going on in the United States is at Leesburg, right outside of Washington, D.C. That runway is only 5,000 feet long. They can see the whole airport with one of these camera masts, right? Makes it pretty easy. Well, the runway at Loveland is 8,500 feet long. That doesn't do it. You just can't see the end of the runway. So what we've actually got, and you can't quite see it in this picture, but at each end of the runway, that's the south end of the runway right over here, and at the north end, there's two other camera masts. And so what we have to do is integrate all of that together. That's pretty challenging from the technology standpoint. None of this is new. It's a Windows computer. They're monitors from Best Buy. They're commercial cameras. They're 4K. No, seriously, none of this is new. What's new is the way we're blending this technology together. And what's interesting about this, I could talk about this for hours. It's not the technology, it's the human factor piece. Here's the deal. The best camera, the best TV is still not as good as your eyes looking out the window and seeing something. And this is the biggest challenge that we have. You simply can't see as well at looking at that wall of monitors as you could if you were looking out of a window. That's just the fact of everything. But what we're working to do, if you could go to that next slide one more time, Brittany, thank you. We're working to be the very first one of these in the world that integrates radar, so that what the controllers have is an additional tool for situational awareness. Right there. But what that will do is when you see a little dot go across that screen that represents an airplane out the window, it will have a little data tag next to it that says it's a Cessna, it's flying at 110 knots, it's at 7,500 feet, and here's the registration number. So when the pilot calls in and says Cessna, 123 Delta uniform, I'm 2 miles west of the airport, the pilot's going to look at that and see that dot. They're not going to be able to tell it's a Cessna, but with the data tag on it that follows the dot, they will. Problem is that's really hard to do, and that's what we're working on. That's what some FAA folks are not interested in doing. Problem is they do that today. Who's ever been to the Denver Center in Longmont? It's in the shopping mall in Longmont. That's where the FAA controls high altitude air traffic across 7 states. They don't have windows. There's no windows. It's in the suburb of Longmont. So trying to convince some legacy thinkers, as we call them at the FAA, that this is a good idea is kind of hard. This is where we would love to leverage. And before the pandemic, we would make little visits to all of your offices in DC to talk about this, but we're getting to the point that we may need to leverage a little pressure from all of you to help the FAA see that this is a good idea. And we paid for this. We gave the FAA $9 million back in 2013 to do this. Well, we'd sure like to see something for our investment. We're giving them a project to make them look good. Can you help us a little bit, trying to be as enthused about it as we are? So,
Okay, I think we said one more question. I saw a hand raised in the back of the room.
Hi, Brad Blake with Bladdock County. So I just applaud you guys' innovation, and I could ask you questions for hours. But one thing just to mention today on national news, electricity recommendations for electric vehicles has been asked to not charge them. So hydrogen would probably be a far better answer, because in many states they're literally asking people not to charge their cars. And then we do have a small airport here besides La Plata County. How do they get funding for some of these things? Do you look at those smaller airports? Do you help those smaller airports?
we do, but state law says they have to be publicly owned. We're not allowed to invest public money in privately owned airports like Animas Air Park. And there's, like I said, there's 9 of them out there. The only exception under state law is a privately owned airport that is in the FAA's national plan of airports. And the only one that meets that criteria is Meadow Lake outside of Colorado Springs, because they're a designated reliever airport for Colorado Springs. And that's the only one, but state law says no public money for privately owned infrastructure. So that's the way that works. But thank you for the comments. I appreciate that.
Okay, let's give them a round of applause. Well, with that being said, thank you guys. Thank you for taking time out of your busy schedules to fly over here. We really appreciate it. You guys have safe travels home. Just one last comment on aviation. According to the economic impact study that's done through the state of aviation, that's 345,000 jobs, $47 to $48 billion back into the state of Colorado, 8% of the state's economy. So when people say, you know, we don't hear a lot about aviation and how that impacts our state and our counties and our local communities is very important. So with that being said, again, thank you guys, and we'll see you somewhere around the malt shop.
We'll come back.
All right, I'm gonna turn this over to Mike for our next presentation.
Thank you, Ray. So our next presentation is Julie Constant with CDOT to talk about the 10-year transportation plan and what is happening from CDOT on the Western Slope. I don't know if you also have anything on recent legislation updates coming out of this. Julie Constant, born and raised on the Western Slope, grew up in Pagosa Springs, Colorado. She became an engineer. She moved away for a while, and then she found her roots and she wanted to come back. She used to be with the Mesa County as an engineer in Mesa County up in Grand Junction many years ago. And then I was fortunate enough to meet Julie and hire her into CDOT about 6 years ago as a traffic engineer for Region 5 down here. And she is now the Regional Transportation Director for Region 5 in Southwest Colorado.
Okay.
David Elaine is our top guy. Follow, he did a great job. I'm here basically to talk about a lot of other stuff that's going on with CDOT. Thank you for the introduction, Mike. I am a native to the Western Slope. My parents moved to Pagosa in 1976. So I have a lot of history and a lot of roots with all of our communities, and it was a great honor to be able to come work for CDOT and be based out of Durango and back at my home and my roots. There's a lot of institutional knowledge in this room today too, between Sydney and Kathy and Mike McGraw and Mike Woolsby. So hopefully I do this justice. A little nervous from that perspective. But feel free to jump in since I've only been the region director since March of 21. A lot to learn, and Mike Woolsby's pretty recently retired. So he might now knows more about some of these projects. I'm going to start high level with funding and some Senate Bill 260 stuff. Senate Bill 151 was a wildlife crossing project bill that was passed this year. And then if we have time, I can run through some projects as well, or at least highlight some big key projects that we've been working on the Western Slope. Okay. So big picture funding. Our annual base budget for 2020 and recent years has been about $1.8 billion. 830 million comes from our feds, and then 970 million comes from the state of Colorado gas taxes and fees. That was pre-Senate Bill 260. How Colorado CDOT has divvied that money up statewide is about 43% takes care of our capital construction and asset management. 23% takes care of maintenance. We only spend 23% of those dollars on plowing our highways, crack sealing, fixing the guardrail, fixing the signage. So we do a lot of work with not a lot of money when it comes to those portions of our state highway maintenance. Realizing CDOT was needing more money because our state gas tax hasn't been raised since 1992, if I remember right, 91. It's been a long time since we've seen a raise in that state gas tax. And as we all know, it costs a lot more money to do a lot more things these days. So back in 2021, Senate Bill 260 was passed. It's been projected to bring in 5.4 billion additional dollars, dedicated dollars coming to transportation over a 10-year period, not on an annual basis. Of that $5.4 billion that is projected over the next 10 years, we are anticipating to see about 1.68 billion in the next 5 years coming in for transportation capacity type projects, big picture 10-year plan projects, which breaks down to about 336 million per year. That money is what we'll be using to work on our bigger 10-year plan projects. So for Southwest Colorado, some of our bigger 10-year plan projects is widening Highway 160 from Elmhurst Corner to the intersection with County Road 225. It's putting shoulders on Highway 285 in the San Luis Valley. So it's doing some of those bigger legacy projects that we haven't necessarily had the funds to do with our normal asset management funds. As you can see, Region 3 and Region 5 don't get a lot of money. Region 3 is basically from Montrose north on the Western Slope, and I cover from Montrose south on the Western Slope. Region 3 does get 225 million, which is more than my 117 million, but we're able to spread dollars very thin by developing a lot of partnerships with our locals. And so I do want to say how much we appreciate all of our local communities and our local agencies coming together and helping us work to combine our pools of money together and spread it further. Senate Bill 260. So some of the interesting things we're starting to see, and we've been talking about with the Transportation Commission lately. A new retail delivery fee of 27 cents for every retail delivery fee that comes to your house. So that's like when you order something from Amazon or some other online catalog option. Ride hailing fees, so your Ubers and your Lyfts, which I was surprised to find when I checked my Uber app the other day. We do have Uber during now. But they're starting to charge a 30-cent fee for every ride that somebody takes in an Uber. If it's an electric or a zero emissions vehicle, then it's only a 15-cent fee. Bridge and Tunnel Enterprise. So before we had the Bridge Enterprise that was funded mostly with the FAST Act and the registration fees that when you register your vehicles. Now there's going to be another 2 cents per gallon of diesel that goes into this fund, and they've added tunnels to it. Because one thing we were finding is our tunnels as an asset program within all of our other asset projects, we're just not getting enough funding. We have a number of big tunnels, especially on I-70, that need a lot of maintenance, as well as the Hanging Lake Tunnel. So this additional funds will help us do better with with our tunnels. And one thing to note is the Riverside Slide Tunnel on Red Mountain Pass, technically snow shed. We did a lot of argument and conversations, and that's technically a tunnel now. And so someday we'll get more money to actually lengthen that longer to take care of that entire slide. So hopefully when we have our avalanches up there, the tunnel doesn't fill up with snow like happened a few years ago. That's one good thing coming down the road. Electric vehicle registrations are going to start increasing. Over the next 5 years, they're going to go from $50 to $96 for full electric vehicles. Hybrids will go from $3 to $27. And then there's a road usage fee of 2 cents per gallon on gas and diesel that was supposed to start in July, but they've delayed it due to what we're seeing with inflation and cost of living and that type of thing going on right now. But all these new fees is what's helping fund Senate Bill 260. So the money that's coming in out of these fees, it's not going to our road projects, will be going to things like clean transit and let's see, all these other enterprises that have been funded. So we have a clean transit enterprise fund now. Some of the Senate Bill 260 money will go into the clean transit enterprise fund. And what that fund is there is to help local communities buy electric buses and buy low emission buses and get more of those out there. The clean fleet enterprise is again for the commercial vehicles that are on the market and to try and get more electric vehicles on the market from that perspective. Non-attainment air pollution mitigation enterprise. More electrification, reducing greenhouse gases, that type of efforts. There's a lot of that type of stuff that we've seen built into Senate Bill 260. The community access enterprise is where we're starting to look at environmental justice and environmental equity and trying to make sure that our communities have pedestrian and multimodal improvement connections within their communities. So that's where some of those funds will start going, as well as the bridge and tunnel enterprise that I just touched on. So Senate Bill 260 is bringing money, which is great, but it's also bringing a lot of other enterprises too, which is going to just add much more of an interesting dynamic into our transportation world. But CDOT in the state of Colorado is very committed to electrification. We're very committed to multimodal transportation and not just thinking about our highways. However, we know that the highways is the life and the bread and the transportation between the communities to keep the trucks and Durango Airport getting gas and that type of thing. So it's an interesting balance and mix that we're living in right now. So out of the Senate Bill 260 money, our next big priority projects that we've been working with our local our TPRs on for Region 5 is the US 160 Elmhurst East. So we're trying to widen 160 from Elmhurst Corner down to County Road 225. And then we've applied for a grant through the IIJA program, which I'll come into in a second. US 285, which isn't technically Club 20, but it's my region. And it gets a lot of us back to Denver when we need to go to Denver. So we're hoping to get some shoulders put on that portion of the highway where we only have a couple foot shoulders. And then US 550 widening. So North Ridgeway through Ridgeway State Park, what an area we call Billy Creek. Right now, we're currently overlaying that. For anybody that came down through there, I apologize for your 30-minute wait. Our governor actually got stuck in that traffic just the other day. So it's good for him to experience what we deal with out here too, right? On top of that project, we will be putting a wildlife crossing in there next year. We're putting that project out for advertisement. And then we'll use future Senate Bill 260 money to come back in and widen the shoulders through that whole corridor where it gets very narrow and windy, and we have a lot of run off the road crashes and head-on crashes, and even a few bicycle crashes. So that's what's coming up as well. Okay, Region 3. Michael's, we can probably talk to some of this better than I can, but we have a US 550 Montrose to Uray County line safety project that's going on. It'll be advertised this winter. In Mesa County, the US 6 and 20 road, exit 26, EDI is going to get some improvements. US 50 and 550 in Montrose, that would be, is getting some signal improvements and then working on some passing lanes near Blue Mesa Reservoir. So those are some of the bigger priority projects that will be taking place in other places on the Western slopes too, thanks to Senate Bill 260. This pipeline of money will continue to allow us to work on those bigger projects because all of these projects are not necessarily asset projects. We get dedicated asset funds to take care of. Okay, let's see, Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act. So for CDOT, we are getting a little bit more base money coming from the federal programs with the IIJA. That's not a huge chunk of money, but what they did do strategically was build a lot of it into grant programs. And so there's a bridge investment program, there's infra, which is those really big projects, rural surface transportation, wildlife crossing, nationally significant federal lands and tribal projects, and then some other smaller grants with congestion relief, clean transit, electrification, rail, and mobility and safer Main Street. So lots of grant applications going on. CDOT has a specific grant writer and grant program that's paying very close attention to all these grants as the NOFOs come out. So far, Region 5 and Region 3 have worked with our local counties to submit a couple of grants. And we're strategically doing that so other parts of the state that have more people and get the bigger dollars, CDOT itself is submitting the grant. And then when we have the local submitted, it's almost like bang for our buck. We did this with La Plata County with the connection project of 160 and 550. La Plata County put in that fast lanes grant for us for CDOT. And then they're passing the money through for us to help make sure that project's successful. We did something similar with the Mountain Ute tribe in Toyac when we did passing lanes down there. So we've seen a lot of success before using these types of models. So that's what we're continuing to do. Okay, so just big picture, one thing we are working on with La Plata County and a grant that we submitted for IIJA. We submitted this for infra and the rural surface transportation grant program, both trying to see what we could leverage and what would happen with the first round. So the goal of our project and what we're trying to do is the purple area up there is that 2-lane section right now with no shoulders and a whole lot of accesses. We are planning to widen that as well as put in a wildlife crossing. The green lane, yes, because there are a lot of wildlife too that hang out on the mesa up there. So when we say widen, we're talking a center turn lane, and then we're talking 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction as you go through that corridor, starting to come in and give more of that urban feel like we have in Grandview, carrying that out further to the east because that's where development's coming. And then as you drop down the hill, there will be a climbing lane, and then we will continue that 4-lane section. We'll get rid of the turn lane, but we'll continue the 4-lane section down the hill to the bridge that's over the Florida River. That bridge will be widened to 4 lanes, and then we'll bring it back into 1 lane in each direction right before we hit County Road 225. We're in the process of designing a high-speed rural roundabout at County Road 225. We have had, even with the latest improvements that we've done at that intersection, so big and wide open, we still had fatal crashes, and we still have a lot of high-speed, high injury crashes at that intersection. So we've got to try something else. And the next thing we're trying is this roundabout. The roadway geometry and configuration as you're coming into the roundabout from both directions will give the driver's clue something's coming up. So part of that is to slow the traffic coming down into there. Trucks will be able to navigate it. You should be able to navigate it 35 to 40 miles an hour if we do it right. That project would be tied into the rest of this grant project. And then as you move further to the east, we've kind of got this gap between where we built a wildlife crossing at Dry Creek. It's a couple mile long gap between 225 and Dry Creek. So we're looking at installing alternating passing lanes through there, again, to help just keep movement of traffic flowing better as we head up to the east. So we've supplied for that grant, or La Plata County applied for that grant on our behalf. It sounds like there might be some people in Washington trying to lobby for this grant, which would be awesome for us. And I did hear from FHWA the other day that our local state of Colorado office is reviewing our application. So hopefully there's some hope on that one. Let's see. And I know Region 3 worked with Brown County for Highway 40 to do some improvements there. And I'm not sure what they all involve, but if Mike wants to say a few words about that project, that'd be awesome.
Well, what I know of it.
At least before you retired.
Yeah, before I retired, one of the things, and to the point of Glenwood Canyon and the detours and folks taking the northern route, one of the things that we really looked at was making improvements to Highway 9, US 40, State Highway 13, to support better movement on the northern route. And one of the things that's looked at within this grant for US 40 is additional passing lanes, which is a big deal. I can tell you, I was complaining to Julie yesterday when I came down. Passing lanes on 550, they're non-existent except for one up there by the snow shed, which is now a tunnel, as you put it. Gentleman in a motorhome pulled over and let half the traffic go by, and I was fortunate to be in the first half of that traffic before he pulled back in. But as you all know, following campers and boats and other things during the summertime tends to irritate us all very much. So that's one of the things they're looking at, safety improvements, wildlife stuff, and some additional passing lanes for US 40 to make it safer in the cases of Glenwood Canyon closing. So how's that, Julie?
Awesome. Thank you, Mike. Appreciate it. It's like a big family here at CDOT. Once you kind of get in, we all take care of each other, which is just awesome. The other part I wanted to just highlight is the rural road surfacing projects that we've had going on the western slope for the last 3 years. Senate Bill 267 and Senate Bill 260 will continue to funnel money to those projects. And so Region 3 has paved 221 miles, with 68 of those being additional paving because of our rural road paving projects. Region 5 has paved 271 miles. 52 of those came from our rural road paving projects. For the western slope, that's more than 500 miles, which is huge. Some of these highways haven't been touched since the 90s. Some of these highways were touched last in the early 2000s. They were really due for a makeover. So we've done a lot of work, for example, on Highway 141 down here. Highway 149 right now between Creed and Lake City is getting a huge makeover and a much needed makeover. That's where the governor actually came and visited one of our project sites while he was out touring. We have a lot of work going on 550 around Ridgeway. So while the construction is a pain, the condition of our highways are getting into much better shape, which is just great to see. So I thought I would pause there, and if you wanted to have questions and answers, if that's okay, with some of those bigger topics we can, or I can dive into projects if there's not discussion.
Whatever you'd like to do. You want to take a couple of questions?
Yeah, I'm going to take it.
Do we have any on Zoom at this point?
You have a comment.
Why don't you let them do the comment and we'll take a question.
Greg Fulton online says EV fees for electric trucks is much higher. Our industry sought to ensure that the fees were the equivalent to the fuel tax on diesel paid in the state. The EV fee for cars in the bill will not be equivalent to fuel tax for a number of years.
Good comment.
Talking about the EV fees, you were saying that Colorado, and I don't know if they've changed it yet, but electric vehicles were only paying $50 a year towards funding of our highways and bridges. And you said just now that I think it goes up to 96 over 5 years. Okay, so if you take 12,000 miles, you drive 12,000 miles a year, you get 22 miles per gallon. You are paying, if you're driving a gas-powered vehicle, you're paying a lot more into the HUTF than what this 5-year thing is to bring electric vehicles up, not even to what we're paying now with gas-powered vehicles. So what I have been wondering and trying to figure out is how are we going to, if our HUTF funding is going down, our gas, we are not increasing our gas taxes. Now we did that 2 cents. How in the world are we going to maintain our transportation system when electric cars supposedly are going to be the thing that everybody's got to do, and it's going to be forced on us? How in the world, if we're getting less money for our, and they're going to be driving on the roads, and they're heavier, they're much heavier vehicles. So they're more maintenance on the road. So how in the world are we going to fund our transportation system? And I don't feel like anybody is looking at that. It's like, let's do it without anybody considering what it's going to take to maintain our roads.
Yay.
Kathy
I
Hall
would
wants
just
to
like to make a
respond.
comment according to that. The thing that you have to take a look at is the reason that this current legislature is making sure they keep it so low is to encourage people to buy electric cars. So I think as citizens, and certainly people at the Western Slope, who highway dollars are so incredibly important, you need to start working on your state legislator saying, okay, enough with this, because keeping it low is the whole process of making everybody go electric cars. You need to go after all your state legislators, say, okay, we've had enough of that. They need to pay their fair share. Because not only that, electric cars are heavy, they actually cause more damage to the roads because they're heavy. So legislators need to step up and stop making it so cheap. It's being done intentionally and it needs to stop.
Great.
Yeah.
Thank you. You know, there are other issues that surround this. And if you're a community that becomes a non-attainment area for clean air, you're going to have additional expense that doesn't come from CDOT to clean that air up. But I just wanted to say that if I looked at your math on my calculator, and if you were doing 12,000 miles a year, but your car got 30 miles per gallon, you're going to be paying $88 in fuel taxes, and that's less than the 96 that an electric vehicle will pay in the future. So it's hard for anybody to draw lines. I think someone's always on the other side of the line, but if you're averaging fuel economy and what type of cars people have, it's difficult because the big trucks, they get 20 or 18, and then the smaller cars get 35 and 40. So, they had to pick some line somewhere in the middle. But I would see higher fees as being appropriate as well. I've supported any number of taxes in the future for transportation, but I just wanted to say that it all depends on what car you have as to whether EVs are paying more or less than you are in registration. Thank you.
I would just like to remind everybody that you
Is
go
there
back,
is everybody off?
There you go.
There we go.
you go back 15 years when the first Toyota Prius came out. And we were doing natural gas buses, natural gas vehicles, propane powered vehicles. None of them have been taxed. So this is a step in that direction. And yeah, it's not equal yet, but it's a good move in that direction because there's been a lot of vehicles using these roads that were paying nothing for these roads for many, many years. In the back.
Matt Schuler, Jackson County. I have a question that doesn't have anything to do with the taxes or stuff. The question I have is with electric vehicles, and I'm a chemist, so this concerns me. There is not a disposal plan for the state of Colorado. What happens when they break down? What happens when you try to replace them? There are tons of heavy metals that are in those cars. I have an aunt who is all about EV, and she, in her garage, has a chassis of the battery. They cut it down as much as they could that she's storing in her garage because there's not a public disposal or private disposal that will take a battery. As they become more and more used, it's going to become a greater and greater concern. So as a chemist, I appreciate the sustainable fuels policy. Carbon is not as bad as everybody gives it a chance to be. It's a wonderful element. Organic chemistry is a wonderful thing that had an organic chemistry professor said, wait till fuel gets to $4 a gallon, fossil fuels will work themselves out. It will happen. But this EV stuff with the batteries and the disposal, and on the taxes part, why don't you tax the tires? Because everybody uses tires instead of using the fuel. It's still something that needs disposed of, and it needs to it kind of goes all sorts of ways.
We'll take one question online.
Greg Fulton, go ahead and unmute yourself.
Thank you. I did want to just mention, we are and have been taxed other alternative fuels for several years now. Actually, In fact, we worked with, in fact, I think Senator Scott worked with us and the petroleum marketers and other groups. And so what we have is we have an equivalency, okay, in terms of when it comes to natural gas, propane, and the others, so that it would be in terms of for those vehicles, so that we would have the equivalent fuel tax. I just want to make sure that that was it. Now, electric was held out a bit more so, and like I said, I'm not speaking one way or the other, but it was more oriented toward trying to promote or allowing that technology, I'd say, to establish itself a bit more, and that's why it wasn't handled at that time, and it was more toward the future was given. So I would also mention that one thing that happens is it's moving up to $96. You know, the road usage fee as well as the diesel fee will be adjusting upward. And so it'll kind of continue to be somewhat out of balance here as we go forward, even because, you know, that won't get to the point where we are probably for around 5 or so years. And by then you'll be, you know, that much higher on those others. But that's just a thought. I realize there's a whole lot of other considerations why we end up going with some of these, you know, looking at the various taxations and the fuels and other items like that. Thank you.
We're going to do one more question online, and then we're going to let Julie get back to anything else that she wants to present to us today.
Kelly Haggerty from La Plata County says, EV cars still use environmentally invasive methods for production, storage, disposal, natural gas, and coal energy and battery production. What is the environmental value of transferring to EV compared to the existing fossil fuels?
Good question. Great question. It's been on a lot of the forefront of everybody's mind, and I don't have answers for you from that perspective. And these are all great questions. You know, this is the beginning of the road of electrification that we're going down. Great comments for sure. There's a lot to be worked out in the dynamics of the details. One thing I forgot to mention is CDOT is even going to the point of all of our, what we call white fleet, which is our regular passenger style vehicles we drive around in. To get a gas vehicle moving forward from this year forward, we have to go to the governor's office and ask for a waiver. From this point forward, we're getting all electric F-150s coming into our fleet. They're exploring electrifications of brooms. They're exploring electrification of attenuator trucks. Even snowplows are starting to be looked at a little bit. So more is coming. There's a lot to be worked out. There's a lot of devil in the details. But as Mike pointed out, at least with the fees, this is a step in the right direction to start something. Is it perfect? No. Is anything ever perfect in the world? No. But that's the direction we're headed. And then one thing I forgot to mention too, with the federal legislation and the federal infrastructure funding that's coming in, there's a new program called NEVI, I believe is the acronym for it. But what that's doing is it's giving CDOT some money to go around the state and put in more fast charging stations. Because one of the big holes or gaps in the system is for people that actually want to take a vacation in an electric car. You come to Durango, and I think there's one fast charging station here. Other than that, your car needs to park and sit for 6 to 8 hours to get charged back up again to drive. So they are working on a map and working on installing more of those types of fast charging stations around the state too. Again, devil in the details when we start to roll more of this out and see more of this. And that's why I wanted to pause here, because I think it was a great conversation. So I'd give you guys a chance to really talk about it and think about it while it was hopefully fresh in your minds before I put you to sleep with a bunch of projects.
I have a question related to the EV charging stations. Is CDOT, I was wondering who is going to own and operate those? Because I hear a lot about putting those charging stations in, and who's going to provide the electricity for it?
We don't know that yet. That's one of the devils in the details that our Innovative Mobility Office was just talking about this at our State Transportation Advisory Committee. That question came up and the answer was, we're working on that. So we're not quite sure yet how that's going to work, how people are going to be charged for it. Ideally, CDOT would not be the owners of these things. We're not set up that way, set up well to collect fees and revenues like that. So they're working on it.
Go ahead, Julie. You have, go with the rest of your slide, and then we'll go back to Q&A.
Okay, so I'm just gonna touch real quick, high level on several projects. Now it's 10:24, it's supposed to be done at 10:45. So I-70 Westvale Pass Auxiliary Lanes project is still moving away. The rest area at the top of the pass has been closed or will be closed through the summer of 23. So those of you that do drive the I-70 corridor regularly, we're still working on that. I-70 Glenwood Canyon Emergency Project. Yeah, there was a big rockfall flood last summer when Mike was the director, and he got to have a lot of fun responding to all that. So we're working through the final pieces of that, on that. There for the I-70 closures, for those that go to Denver a lot, we do apologize. Every time we go into flood watch, we're closing that canyon down. We know it's an impact to the traveling public. Yes, hold on, Michael's talking a minute. And our maintenance crews are definitely feeling the strain from it too. I know Jason is trying, the new region director is trying to rethink some of those strategies. So hopefully maybe we'll lift some of those very cautious measures that we have in place. Mike.
So just so everybody understands the process for Glenwood Canyon closures right now, you can help us communicate that out. Working with the National Weather Service, I say our, 7 weeks, but CDOT's internal meteorologists and others, Mike's trying to break me of the hour thing, but when the National Weather Service issues a watch, a thunderstorm watch or a flash flood watch for the I-70 corridor, specifically Glenwood Canyon, they have additional weather monitoring in there. All of the CDOT staff responds out to the interstate. Sometimes they're sitting out there for 16 to 18 hours. I can tell you that it's taken a massive toll on the maintenance forces in that area. Section 2, which is the northern part of, or the central part of Region 3, they have a 30% vacancy rate right now. They have 71 vacancies out of about 160 snowplow drivers. They have 268 employees, but these folks go out and they sit on the interstate for hours. If it goes to a flash flood warning, that's when they close it. When the flash flood warning expires, that's when they open things back up. So there's not really a better way to do that right now to keep everybody safe until such time as the canyon decides it's not going to do its thing anymore. So just be aware that they're not doing it to try to inconvenience you. They're trying to do it to keep you from getting smacked with a bunch of mud rocks if something was to happen. So the more you can communicate that out to folks, the better, and the more that my former employees in Region 3 would appreciate it, because I can tell you that spending 2 years in that canyon caused me to go look for other things to do.
Thank you, Mike. Yes, go ahead.
Is there any estimate on how many years since the revision?
Interestingly enough, working with the Forest Service over the course of the last couple of summers, they were very enthusiastic about the amount of regrowth that happened last year. Interestingly enough, if you look at the canyon itself and the geology of the canyon and what actually ran out on the road, a lot of it was the bottom of the canyons, where the drainages, where all the drainages, they got so much water in such a hurry that it sheeted off of all of that. Most of the material that came down and impacted the interstate and the river was actually in the bottom of the drainages. It wasn't in the burn scars. So the CDOT geologists and some of the Forest Service folks, they're very optimistic that if they're impacted with large amounts of rain again, they're not going to see the same type of incident. I can tell you that last summer during when the big mudslides happened, we got 5 inches of rain in 15 minutes. Yeah, but as you know, later in the summer, over the course of 3 days, we got 4.5 inches of rain and nothing happened. So with that being said, the impacts to, they're hopeful that this will not be a reoccurring thing, but until things settle down and a lot of that stuff is figured out, I would say probably this summer and next summer are probably going to be the greatest impacts.
And what we've seen so far this summer from the bigger storms that have rolled through and actually rained, we haven't seen movement. So we're hopeful that it's going to get better instead of getting worse as we move forward. So thank you, Mike.
It was announced yesterday that they're looking at some Cottonwood Pass detour improvements. for when the canyon is closed, and I'm wondering if money has been allocated towards that, or whether you can speak to that a little bit as well.
There is an effort going on that's being led by our headquarters office. They are taking a hard look at what it would take. And some communications have started with the counties along that corridor, but as far as I'm aware, we don't have any actual funds allocated to work on it. There was a conversation about maybe applying for a grant for that road. I don't believe it's gone anywhere yet. Yeah, there's a lot of dynamic with doing that. Mike could go into it for hours, and he's not gonna say. Okay, so State Highway 13 is being worked on up in Garfield County. More efforts are continuing to work on that whole corridor. That's been corridor Region 3's been working on for a long time. UX6 in Clifton is getting a makeover basically. The project is out for advertisements. It's 21 million. It looks like we're going to install a few roundabouts, do some center median, and do some multi-modal improvements and drainage improvements. Oh, sorry. There we go. I can hear myself. Blue Creek Canyon obviously is still moving forward. The good news on Blue Creek Canyon is we have stopped those full daytime closures. It's alternating traffic in each direction now through the daytime through there. It's my understanding. I think they're just still doing some evening closures, but we're beginning to see less and less impacts on the US 50 through that corridor for those that get to enjoy that. Here in Durango, we just completed a medium project through the Camino corridor, and we upgraded some signals. And on the very north edge of town, we didn't build a ski jump, for those that think that's what that is. It's a pedestrian refuge, pedestrian crossing. The way the contractor built the concrete island wasn't per plan, so that will get fixed. The reason why it's sitting the way it is right now is due to delays in the supply chain for the signs that have blinking flashing lights and the pedestrian activated crossing piece. So we're not quite done yet. We'll be back. We just did a new tape project to basically replace all the striping through the concrete pavement areas in Durango and Alamosa. So hopefully that reflects much better at night now than it was doing. So that was a great improvement to see. Our connection project, it is still moving ahead. Right now it is projected to be finished during the December 2023. The schedule is partly due to work shorting on the staffing side. It's just taken the contractor a lot longer than they anticipated to get a lot of the work done out there. Currently, if you drive across the Grandview Bridge or look up from that direction, I guess we have that closed at the moment because they're working right on top of it. We are continuing to bring that hillside down. It's pretty impressive if you saw can picture in your head where it was at before to where it's at now, and more is coming down as we speak. Paving of the northbound lanes is happening now. And by the end of summer, the plan is to shift all the traffic that now is going one lane each direction on the southbound lanes, put those onto the northbound lanes, and then start working on the southbound lanes. The windrow of all the material you see getting piled out there is getting ready to work on those southbound lanes. And we are working on the bridge settlement issues. It's not the bridge that's settling, it's the approaches that's settling on 2 of those bridges out there. And those will get fixed before we open this project. So we're working through the details of that too right now. We just improved County Road State Highway 172 and County Road 318 down there at Ignacio, added some intermediate, added a turn lane. That was a safety project with the tribe down there and La Plata County. Our wildlife crossing project on US 160 and at the intersection of 151 is almost done. We're going to do a ribbon cutting the last week of July to celebrate the project. I was just through there this week and it's stained. It looks beautiful. We have an overcross and we have an undercrossing, and we've already seen activity going on in the undercrossing this winter. So we're really excited to get this piece complete because this is one of our highest high hit areas with wildlife and vehicles. McCabe Creek in downtown Pagosa, for those that drive through there, is getting a new 3 new box culverts going in. We anticipate this project will also be done by the fall of this year. We'll do another project celebration. Senate Bill 267 and stimulus funds help make this project come to fruition. If we hadn't had some of these extra funding programs coming in, we would have never replaced this with our traditional asset program. Fiber is going across Wolf Creek Pass finally. It was supposed to come across last summer, but the contractor we awarded it to went bankrupt. So they're out there this year. Just going over Wolf Creek this week too. We are from the top of the pass all the way down to the overlook. So they're making great progress out there. We will have fiber that will go from CDOT owned fiber all the way from I-25 to the intersection of 160 and 84 there on the east side of Pagosa. And we have more through partnering and planning efforts going on to continue fiber all the way over to Durango and into Cortez and down to New Mexico. There's a private company called Arcadian that's running fiber from Albuquerque and Phoenix all the way up to Denver. And so they're partnering with some of us on this. We're going to get 96 strands of dark fiber. We're working with our local broadband initiative group as well to figure out a way to leverage as much access to fiber and high-speed internet that we can get for our communities, because it's a huge struggle down here. Our new transportation commissioner, Mark Garcia, that took over for Sydney last summer, really has his eye on this and is really making sure the transportation commission is paying attention to it. And we've got executive management working on some of those partnering efforts too. So more to come, but this is a huge step in the right direction. Another big resurfacing project we have going on right now on 160 is from the Four Corners area to Aztec Creek. We're actually resurfacing a little bit of 160 in New Mexico because New Mexico can't really get to it. So there's going to be a passing lane involved, resurfacing going on. This project is supposed to be done by the fall. So hopefully they're going to make it. And then for those that are driven through 550, we are doing a lot of resurfacing between Uray and Kelowna. Again, just a say facelift that needed to happen. And then next summer, we'll be coming back with a wildlife crossing through this area as well. West of Pagosa Springs, that's super rough, was supposed to get an overlay this summer, but when we put the project out to bid, we only got one bid and it was way above our budget. So we held off and we're going to re-advertise this project this fall with hope to go ahead and pave this section of the highway during 23. We also thought it might be nice to give Pagosa a break and not have two projects stacked on top of each other. They are going to have several years. So we've got McCabe that'll finish this year. We've got the summer of 23 will be the resurfacing project next year. And then summer of 24, we're going to go through the entire downtown area and reconstruct that with concrete pavement like we have here in Durango. Yeah, that's going to be a big project. And potentially put some center medians in a few places and maybe do a road diet. So Pagosa is going to see some impacts for several years to come. Again, the Pagosa Reconstruct project is another project that's happening because of 267, 260, and some stimulus funds, but much needed work to happen there. 172 Ignacio to Elmhurst Corner, we're going to advertise resurfacing of that project this December, with hopefully doing that resurfacing next summer. Red Mountain Pass is getting an avalanche, is getting fixed avalanche systems like several of our other passes has got. We initially put the project out to add really late this spring, which we knew was risky and probably weren't going to get any bidders, and we didn't. We were working through the Forest Service and a bunch of feds in Washington to help them understand why we needed this system up here, and it took a little while, but we got there through a whole bunch of pictures and conversations. So we're going to re-advertise what we call a GASX system up there. We're aiming for two potential locations. One's near the summit. It's called Blue Point. It's right at the top, and almost 2 flakes of snow causes that sucker to run sometimes. And then Mother Klein, which is down near the Engineer Pass Road area, is also slated to get one. So we're going to advertise that project this summer, late fall, and hopefully we'll get it done. We have these systems on Monarch. Wolf Creek has some, Lizard Head had some, and we're having some really good successes because it really gives us more flexibility on when we are able to shoot those avalanches. And I know Region 3 has a bunch too, so we're excited for that. And our maintenance teams are really excited. All right, so that's what we got. Projects that are coming down the pipeline.
Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, quick question. Chris Lopez with CHAPA, and you not looking for an answer here, but as somebody who frequently travels over Red Mountain Pass and knowing the rock slide that occurred several years ago in that Ruby Walls section, I believe, just can you speak to any concerns and or solutions you're considering? Because I know that's a big concern being the primary artery, obviously, between Durant and Silverton. So just any information you have, because every time I drive through that section, I'm like, where this whole thing could come down someday, so.
I think that every time I drive it too. And my son just drove it by himself a week ago. So, yes, we do have a rockfall mitigation group that is fully aware of what we have going on Red Mountain and pays very close attention. When that most recent rock slide happened, and I think Mike was very involved with the process, we went up and put up a bunch of rock fence to catch those boulders. And we're monitoring that system to make sure that that's working and that's staying in place. But if you want to touch more, Mike, go for it.
So Ruby Walls, when it initially happened, there was a rock face about the size of a football field that actually broke loose almost 2,000 feet above the roadway. So when that came down, it left a huge debris field up on the slope. So there was this huge massive area, about 70,000 square feet of talus that remained from that. So initially we went to the commission and we got approval from the commission to do emergency repairs. So we put a temporary fence up there, rockfall fence, to try to capture that. And then that talus field, we tried to lay rockfall mesh on it to help hold it in place. About a year and a half later in the summer, some of you may have seen on Facebook, there was a big rainstorm that hit up there, and it was literally that Ruby Walls area was like just a cascading waterfall coming down onto the road. Well, I got with my team and we happen to have a camera up there, and the camera around and said, let's look at the fence, make sure the fence is okay. The 6 foot high fence was now full of rock sitting above the road. And it was a temporary fence. It wasn't a permanent fence. And then we look up into that talus field and there's a big washout that went right through it and it washed all the rock out. And it was back down to bare rock, but there's still this huge massive field of that. So we went forwards and we got our rockfall group has funds and we did a major project. The first thing we did is we put that mesh up originally, but we never anchored it hard into the rock base. And so that project first went up there and we went ahead and put anchors in there and really sucked it down tight to help hold that rock in place. The fence that's up there that has all the rock in it now, it was too unsafe to remove that. So it's still there to this day. But what we did is we went directly below it, about 10, 15 feet below it, and we put a permanent rockfall fence in. These are big I-beams, like 10 by 10 I-beams that are actually anchored into the mountain now. And then a much heavier cable fence is now up there. And that has worked very well since then. And we haven't had the same events since then. So keep your fingers crossed, things are going good, but we have a much more robust system now for that.
Mike, one more question online.
Shelley Shaw, candidate for House District 59, says there were mentions of contractors going bankrupt and not fulfilling the builds according to plan, like the pedestrian walkway in Durango. Those are funded by our tax dollars. So what is happening to ensure that we are not being wasteful and being good stewards of taxpayer money?
So what happens to ensure that we're not paying more than we should be when those situations happen is we have a really good attorney general's office in Denver. And so anytime we advertise a project and we award a project to a contractor, like what happened with Wolf Creek Fiber, and they go bankrupt, they do a bond. And so then we work with the bonding company and rely upon that bond to make sure the project still happens. So it didn't cost any more money to see that as far as the actual contract value. It did cost some staff time, but the actual contract was still held at the same amount due to the bonding company being involved. And then the 550 project, we're there, again, it's on the contractor and their dime to go ahead and come back. Once we showed them they didn't construct it per plan, they have to fix it and it doesn't cost us additional funds to make sure that happens. So that's why we have inspectors on every one of our projects to make sure that if something like this goes awry, we've got well documented what they should have done versus what actually happened to make sure we're covered.
And she says, thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Shut off. Thank you.
That was a wealth of information, so thank you. As we all travel throughout the state of Colorado, we notice a lot of construction going on. And the fact that we have such a short construction season to begin with, you know, it takes a lot of inconvenience and a lot of patience. So thank you, CDOT, for what you do. So now we get into the fun part, our resolutions. And so I wanted to read a little something before we actually dove into that, if I can find it here. So as most of you all know, Club 20 adopted a policy several years ago that all our resolutions would be reviewed and updated every 5 years. As chairs and co-chairs of our policy committees, we have been asked to delete, combine, and amend those resolutions, working through our advisory panels / committees and bring recommendations to the policy committees and ultimately the full board, which meets twice a year. Mike LeFay and I are the current co-chairs for Transportation Policy Committee, and we want you all to know, with the help of our staff and our Transportation Policy Committee, we have met several times over the last year and a half to accomplish the task at hand and bring those resolution recommendations before you. In fact, at the spring board meetings this year, we had 3 more resolutions that were incorporated and adopted into one resolution, TR-20-2, by the full board, and one was up for renewal. Last summer at our policy meetings in Montrose, we had 24 resolutions on the agenda, and we went through 18 of them, with some recommendations to the advisory committee and recommendations to the whole board. Most all of them were on the agenda for consideration at that particular meeting. We will be convening with our advisory committee from time to time as we continue to go through these existing resolutions and the guiding principles, so we can have them ready for the 2023 winter policy meetings. You will notice there are several resolutions on the agenda this morning, and we would ask that you carefully review them with the understanding that there has been a ton of work and thought put into these resolutions as we move forward. So with that being said, I would like to, first of all, skip down to the PFAS resolution. And it was the consensus of our advisory committee that we do not adopt that particular resolution. What's that?
So just to give a bit of an explanation of the packets that you all received. The PFAS one is a standalone one that is going to be at the bottom of your packet, the last one. But the other ones seem a little bit more beefy. So for the first one, you will see on the first page of the stapled document, front and back will be the resolution that we came to conclusion with. This is the resolution that we are presenting to you all. The remaining documents in this packet will be the resolutions that are being incorporated in there, and you will see exactly what we took from those resolutions and what we did not take from those resolutions to incorporate those into the first page of that document. The same will go for the transportation funding document. However, that one's a little longer, so it'll be the first 3 pages, and then it will follow with the edits tracking document. Does that make sense? Does anybody have questions? Yes. All right, moving forward.
Thank you, Brittany. And just for the record, Brittany has been instrumental in helping us get through this process to where we are today. So the PFAS thing is more just there for information. I want to get through that one real quick because we're not asking for a recommendation to the full board for the PFAS draft resolution. It's there for your information, and it was the consensus of the advisory committee that we just put it out there because we felt like we needed more information going forward. And this will probably be a standalone resolution at the end of the day when it does get adopted. So this will probably be something you'll see in the future as well. So with that one being said, I would draw your attention to the TR-XX-XX, which is the guiding principles. And before we actually dive into that, and I'm going to have Brittany go through this, is that with our guiding principles are actually divided up into 6 categories. And that's the delivery of freight to Western Colorado, passenger transportation in Western Colorado, highway maintenance and improvement of West Slope roads, transportation funding, air service on the Western Slope, and CDOT planning and representation will all be included within those guiding principles. And the whole point is to narrow down the existing resolutions that we have on the books. I think we started with 45 resolutions. Currently, we have about 21 resolutions on the website. So we're making progress, and it's only with the help of you folks in the room and our advisory committee that we are going to reach our goal. So with that being said, you have the resolution up on the screen there, Brittany. And that if you want to, we can walk through that. And at the end of the day, we'll be looking for a recommendation to the full board to adopt this and also delete the other resolutions that will be referenced in this particular document. Yes, Rachel.
I just want to thank Brittany and you, Ray, for all the work on this. I know it's been very complicated and challenging. I personally have read through these, and I think that they are very exact in terms of pulling together all the important components of the individual prior resolutions. The one thing I would note is it still a little bit talks about some specific roads, but I'm okay with that. You know, I think we are trying to get away from each hearing having someone bring their road project to a resolution. So I do think they're broad enough to cover that, and I do support the ones that are mentioned. So I don't know, maybe for moving the meeting along to allow discussion to occur, I would make a motion to approve the new guiding principles transportation, which is currently TRXXXX without a number.
I second that motion.
Nice. All right, so we have a motion and a second, and we're gonna leave this open for discussion.
Are
Brittany?
we talking about both of them all in one, or are you first talking about the funding one? There's a guiding principles on transportation funding and also one on highway maintenance.
Yeah, I was just doing it one at a time.
Funding?
Yeah.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
Okay, with that being said, is there any discussion along these lines before we call for the vote?
You can really do it that fast. I'm impressed.
Yes, Nancy.
And yes, we need to do it that fast. Otherwise, it will take us years to finish our resolutions. And my point is, we need to do our work before these meetings. And if we have a problem after we do this, you can pull it back and come up with a few edits, but look at how many I mean, it cannot be done in these meetings in a 20-minute period. And it can't be done for PLNR. And I know the amount of work Brittany did. I know the amount of work it took on the transportation committee. And I think Christian can even weigh in. Some of those little, when she trained all the new committee chairs, she says, I can't read all that little detail. I need a broad statement, and then I'll dig into the facts, and I need it so that I can make the comment. And so we can't micromanage. That's my position. That's why I seconded the motion. And I say, let's just go through it. Thank you, Ray.
Thank you, Nancy, for those comments. So we have a motion and a second already. Go ahead, Ann. All right. All right, so I'm gonna ask Brittany to read back what the motion was.
The motion was to approve, well, it would be to adopt and also incorporate while deleting the other resolutions.
Correct. For the
Yes,
transportation.
as proposed.
And
Transportation funding.
And recommended to the full board.
Yes.
Okay, so with that being said, I'll call for the vote. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed, same sign. All right, motion carried. Thank you very much.
Go team.
Yes, go team.
That was a railroad.
So we'll move on to the next part of that, which Brittany, you want to tell them what that is? Roll it up.
The next one is the highway maintenance, and we did the same thing with this one that we did with the transportation funding.
Motion to approve as submitted.
I'll second.
Okay, we have a motion by Brad and a second by Shauna. Oh, by Mike Murphy. Okay, apologize. So we have a motion and a second to adopt and recommend. Go ahead, Rachel.
Just for discussion's sake, when we go to the fall board meeting, I think it'd be a lot more readable to the greater membership if we don't have it, the red line. We just present this as the new resolution without the underlining in the red, because it'd just be a lot easier to read. You know, maybe have the old deleted there still, or potentially deleted, but it just gets so hard to read this with all the red line and the underline.
And
I'm
I
not
would
sure-
just suggest that the board of directors needs to see what was deleted.
Yeah.
And so that red line is important to include so that they can see that history and they're not seeing that it was arbitrarily composed.
Yeah, well, you know, I'll leave you to figure out how to make it the most readable. It just seems that with the deleted ones behind it, it's fairly apparent, but I do understand, it's just hard to read.
We could do both, so you could read it really easily what the final's gonna be, and then you see the documentation also.
Yeah.
More paper, but hey.
There are a couple places within this resolution that when I read through it, like, you know, and a comma and all that stuff. I'm not gonna get into that right now. So that doesn't change those particular issues don't change the definition or the wording or the intent. I'll get together with Brittany at some point in time and we'll make those tiny adjustments so it's a little bit more readable. And so we don't have those types of discussions at our board meeting.
And Janet Farmer raised her hand online.
Okay, go ahead, Janet.
Yeah, I just wanted to make sure it says listed at the bottom of the resolution, 5 of the other resolutions that were incorporated, but on the agenda, it only shows 3 of those. And I just want to make sure which way that goes.
Give us a minute and we'll take a look.
Yeah, it doesn't list TR 0301 and TR 0102 on the agenda.
Okay, but I think that Janet, the 01-2 is actually in the reference of the proposed new guiding principles. I saw it when I was reading through there. Is it not on there?
So Janet, with regards to your question, we had a previously adopted highway resolution. And what we did with this one was incorporate the 2 that were already in the highway one into this one. We kept those while we added more to it.
Okay, so what happens to TR 0301-1 and TR 01-2? Because they're not listed on the agenda as going anywhere.
So those were already deleted and incorporated into a highway resolution that we had on the books.
Okay.
And they're also referenced in this
Yes.
currently. So that makes them part of the agenda, the way I see it. Okay, so we have a motion and a second. Any other questions before we move to the vote? How about online? We're good? All right, so with that being said, all in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? All right, hearing none, motion adopted and recommended to the full board. Thank you very much. So with that being said, we might just finish a little bit early. Nancy?
I think this is a good point to bring up. You recognized your committee, your advisory committee. So if you feel like you wanted more input, you need to get on the advisory committee because they're the ones, the workhorses behind every committee. So we didn't want to railroad it. Somebody might have used that word. That's not our intent. The work has been done. And so I just want to reiterate, we need more people on our advisory if you want to dig deep. And then we don't bore everybody that's maybe new to our meetings. We can go into the content like the excellent presentations we had today. So
Thank you, Nancy. And we both know and understand that how much work this takes. But while, you know, speaking of advisory, we have, I think, 7 members, I think, on our advisory committee, and there's several of them here. So if you're on our advisory committee, raise your hand. Kathy Hall, Donna. So look, we got 1, 2, 3, 4. It looks like 4 of the 7 I think that sends a really good message and a really strong team. So thank you, advisory committee, for being part of this. Mike and I really do appreciate that. Julia's still here, from CDOT?
No.
She's left. Okay, so I was gonna say maybe we'd have time for more Q and A, but apparently we don't. So Mike, do you have any closing comments?
The one thing I want to tell people, I just joined the advisory committee about a year ago. And going through this process, working with this group, it's actually pretty darn efficient. We get work done quickly. We don't dawdle around and take a lot of your time to do that. So if you do want to join, the commitment's not that bad. And it's, getting together probably 2-3 times between policy meetings and really spending, an hour at the tops, an hour and a half, 2 hours to work through these things. Ray and I, we work really well together to try to streamline this for everybody and not waste your time. So we really do welcome getting more support and help on this.
There's a comment in the back.
I just had a question. These meetings that you have, are they online or do you meet?
So the question was, are these meetings online or do we meet in person? We've been doing this virtually because we have people all over the Western Slope.
Yeah. Jolene, go ahead and unmute yourself.
This was just a reminder for Ray about Greg talking briefly about the oversize overweight issues on the Western Slope.
I didn't quite understand what she said.
The oversized overweight issue.
Yeah, and who's that?
Jolene Hotsettler.
Oh, yeah, Joanne. So go ahead. Did you want to mention something? I know Greg was going to make an announcement. Did you want to say something about it?
Yeah, Ray, thank you, Jolene. If I could have a few minutes here, a couple issues that I think are of importance. First, one of the things is, we are having a significant difficulty moving oversized overweight loads on the West Slope. And a big part of that is the fact that, one of the things is like, we talk about the little blue in terms of like the limitation on the widths on this. When I talk about oversized overweight, we're talking about these items that cannot, like sometimes transformers, modular housing, things like this that can't be physically broken down. And so what happens is, when we have multiple projects, and it's not only the little blue that's a challenge for us because of the width limitation there, and we're having on 70, a few projects there. There really isn't a lot of coordination among those. And then we have the project on 13. So what we're doing here is we're adding literally, some cases upward of 200 miles. That's a detour. Okay, in many cases, we're going through communities that are wondering what the hell we're going through those little communities for, because we're having to go around the interstate. Some cases we're having to go outside of the state, all around the state to do this. And, the amount of time for that and the concepts and concerns about safety on being on some of those roads. Plus, the whole thing when I'm just looking at in terms of with limited drivers, how already actually we have a driver shortage. That amount of time means we're going to lose that driver, literally for the next trip or day or so on that end of it because they're running out of hours. But where it really hits home then is we're possibly adding maybe upward of $1,000. And if we're looking at taking modular housing from somewhere which is being built maybe in Southwest Colorado and bringing it into Summit County, I mean, we're adding, essentially that housing is being brought in there for employee housing to make it affordable. And essentially we're making it less affordable. So I would ask if Club 20 and would work with us. And we were asking to end up, one is to look at some of these things in terms of a holistic matter, but also look at, the whole thing of trying to move oversized overweight loads on the West Slope, in terms of, really frankly throughout the year, which is a challenge, but also actually the ability for moving freight, in the West Slope. We don't have a lot of alternate corridors. The whole issue of resiliency is a killer. I will tell you right now, every time I-70 closed down at Glenwood Canyon, we're looking at anywhere between 2 to 4 hours additional for a truck driver, which means we're probably going to lay that driver over because they'll run out of driving hours, which means we end up in some cases in terms of bringing in food from, for City Market or King Supers from their locations in Denver, actually. We're going to run short on those fuel. In fact, on the fuel side, we've run short actually in some of the stores right now on some of this. So I would just say, I would like to see if we couldn't end up looking to CDOT to work with us on how we could work with the Club 20 and the West Slope folks on some sort of how we're going to move right in the supply chain issues there. So that was one item. And looking at the resiliency. The other issue I would bring to everyone's attention is they may not be aware of it, but we probably, right now, the recommendation related to in terms of the EPA out of it would be to have the Denver North Front Range area move from serious to severe for ozone. Okay. Now, what that's going to require is it's going to require in the summer periods reformulated gasoline, which is a boutique type of form, which is used in California and a few other states. How that affects the West Slope is it's going to cost about 50 cents to potentially over $1 more per gallon. It will be mandated if we do go into severe. Let me note that those prices and that gas cost will not be limited to those areas. The reality is how fuel gets distributed in Colorado is a large portion of that fuel is coming from Suncor over to the West Slope. They will not be producing two separate versions on this end of it. Plus, they have to incur hundreds of millions of dollars to make this conversion over. On top of that, the rest of our fuel comes out of places like Wyoming and some other areas. We've already talked to those refineries. They're not going to produce reformulated gasoline. It's costly and they can find other markets. So that would mean we're going to have to either rail or truck it in potentially from Texas or California. The overall cost of this is going to be fairly expensive. And like I said, it isn't going to be where we end up having a differential. You essentially are dependent on the fuel that's coming, and out of this in terms of the Front Range areas. Some you're getting out of, if you can get some you may be able to get some out of directly from Salt Lake and some of that on this end of it. But I would just say right now, now the clear option here is if the governor would ask, once again, like under previous Governor Hickenlooper, for what we call 179B waiver under EPA, which is a offset for the emissions from other states, which in a large portion are wildfires and others. The current governor has not sought that at this time, actually rescinded that, or a potential extension on this. Without that, we will go and we would be 1 year after it's identified as being severe, they would have to actually implement that. Now, that could be as early as next year. So I thought I'd put that on everyone's radar screen. It does affect you. I wish it didn't, but it's that's a portion of how our fuel gets distributed in the state, and I'm happy to answer any questions on any of those issues.
Mr. Fulton, I appreciate your comments, your concerns, and I don't know if at this point in time what you're talking to us about would require a draft resolution, or if this would be something that we would want to put on our winter policy committee meetings in February for a presentation. So what I'm going to suggest then would be, in the essence of time, is that Mike and I and Brittany and yourself can do a Zoom meeting and get more educated on that. And if we feel like we need to run this by the advisory committee, we'll do that and then move forward from there. So With that being said, thank you, sir. And
Just one last thing I just mentioned, the timing wise, it's a much shorter window, and I just would encourage us to get, especially on the, issue related to the reformulated gasoline. And
we can do that, but out of respect for our staff, due to the fact that we have some very important meetings coming up this fall, we will work with staff, and as their schedule allows, that's what we'll do.
Thanks again, Ray. Thank you so much for your time, everyone.
You bet. Thank you, Mr. Fulton. We appreciate you. Anybody else, any comments before we shut down? Okay, with that being said, we're all adjourned. Thank you very much, and we'll turn it over to tourism.
And the tourism committee will be meeting in about 5 minutes or so. So we have a short break.
Well, that's part of the conversation. I kind of like, oh, it's safe, it's not what to do. When the water's crazy. Well, I mean, there's a lot of things, but you kind of find on the side, it's about to be.
Mary Jo. Mary Jo, can I grab you? Mary Jo, can I grab you?
Thank you, sir. Thanks for keeping it warm.
There you go. I think they're wrong. Because we have recreation projects all over down here. And they don't have
You tried. It's stressful.
Oh. So it's not even a question. So I heard some projects.
See, I have. But that's really not.
The water use.
So it's, I think it's been, this is just noise right now.
So you want me to just, I think we have a few new people, Jack, stay.
Yeah, just when it comes to everybody introduce yourself, just say the last name. And then for the, right there. And then for this portion, you guys have to say, just pass it over to me, and I'll just read out your place. Christian. We got the volume for the videos, yes.
I would even think they like that. That's my take on it. Stories I've heard. You don't hear about that at all down here. Maybe that's something that could be done. But Steve Anderson. Same
You've got to protect your water. It's not freebie. It doesn't matter where you're at. I know.
So there you go.
There you go. There's always something on the right.
So are you wanting to go?
I'm still kind of on the water.
Have you ever heard of painting yourself into a corner?
Yeah, I thought he was pretty much out of the travel.
He's having fun.
Oh, Chevron.
Yeah, he's retired from the water now.
Yeah, that's another. I know they have to do consulting for Southwest.
Well, and at the same time, how the water committee want to talk about this, but how do you make electricity? With coal.
COVID's off. I hope.
If everybody will please start taking your seats, please take your seats. The tourism committee will begin in 1 minute.
It's so great to see you.
This thing about losing 50,000.
So he's got to use this. I don't know.
No, oh, we have to, for the people on Zoom. I can see.
Some of them just went way over.
Test this.
New Mexico, they just closed everything down.
So should it not work, though?
So
you'll
you
have to
county
use the-
commissioner,
or
that's a
the-
good job. You go to a lot of meetings.
There are, well, the CCI has. Yeah, CCI has those right now, so that's why I was jumping.
Go back and forth.
Yeah.
And they'll usually type in.
Proposed some
if they don't
legislative
hear.
changes, and so I had to,
Well, there's a lot going on. It's an active time.
Yes, it's on though, because if we shut it off.
So you can't get too many things, otherwise you mess things up. I guess if I can't advance the slide, can you advance it from over there?
Yes, just look at me.
Yeah. That's a good thing.
And it's batteries.
If I can ask everybody to please take their seats. If we start on time, we can end on time. And those in the hall? All right. Thank you, Christian. Want this, I'm like Ray Beck. Start on time, end on time, gotta learn from the best. Steve, you know, they've trained me well. Okay, we still have people on break, but we are going to start our meeting. And I'd like to welcome everybody to tourism. If we have, I think we have, I see at least one new person in the room. He's on his phone, but that's okay. If you would please introduce yourself and let us know who you are with. Mr. Llewellyn.
Jack Llewellyn, Durango Chamber of Commerce.
Okay, great. Club 20 members. All right. I am Mary Jo Coulihan. I am the brand new first time ever chair for the tourism subcommittee. And no spit wads, no heckling in the back, Mr. Lopez, any of those things. So thank you all so very much. I just want to say a few words similar to what Ray and Nancy said, how important these subcommittees are. And we are rebuilding this group, just like telecommunications, and always asking for support. So please, I would like to introduce one of our policy chair people that is here with us today, her first Club 20 meeting as well. And that would be Meredith Badler, who introduced herself earlier, the Deputy Director of the Colorado Business Committee for the Arts. So thank you so much for being on that. Tom Kleinschmidt is also part of our subcommittee. So we are looking to rebuild that. I really don't want to take a lot of time right now. What I really want to do is present our guest speaker today. He makes me look great as my first presentation today because I got the director of the Colorado Tourism for the state of Colorado here in person, all the way from Denver, to speak to us today about tourism in Colorado. So I am very, very honored that Tim Wolf, our director of tourism for Colorado, is here to speak to us. Thank you, Tim.
Thanks. Thanks, Mary Jo. And the only reason I'm using the mic is to make sure that the Zoom people can hear. But I want to thank her. So smart that she had those signs all the way here to the front door. I think she did that specifically to make sure that I didn't get lost. So that was awesome. Yeah, there you go. So I need a raise of hands, pancakes or waffles, okay? Pancakes? Okay, waffles? Yep, you guys are matching Fort Lewis. If you downstairs, I was coming in and I almost got lost before I turned around and saw the sign up the stairs. And they were having a contest to see what was more popular with the students. So you guys are kind of aligned with them. So I'm pretty excited to be here. I've been in Colorado since 1998. I've run Imogene Pass. I look forward to doing Tour of the Moon. I've done Ragnar race 4 or 5 times. So not only do I love to visit everywhere, I love to actually experience all the sites. Telluride, Durango, Pagosa Springs, Ouray, all these places, amazing. Steamboat, don't want to leave any of them out. I'd love to just get all around. So when I get an invitation, I'm like, yes, I'm driving there and I want to spend as much time as I can. So wanted to just give you guys a highlight of tourism. And it's been a super busy week because all of our research, I don't know which way to point. There you go. All of our research came out and these are updated numbers. No need to take notes or anything else. We'll give you the whole presentation. We want you to have it. The Colorado Tourism Office, from a state perspective, I like to use the analogy of a dealership, a super high-end dealership. In fact, in the United States, we are the 5th most popular dealership in the United States. Hawaii and Florida and a couple of these others, a little bit more popular in terms of dealership, so to speak. In our dealership, we have a lot of brands. So we may have Mercedes, it could be Aspen. We might have Volvo, which could be Breckenridge, and on, and you kind of get the analogy. And so what we do from a state perspective is we want everybody to come into the dealership. And then we want to highlight our brands. And those brands, Visit Breck, Vail, Visit Telluride. All those brands then get their word out in terms of what is the best model or brand to purchase. So we want to inspire everybody to come to our dealership, and then we want to and let those brands shine on their own so that our visitors can come enjoy those brands. So 2021 at a glance, we know it's a recovery. So these are just kind of the high level numbers. And all of our numbers just came off the press. They're on our website. These reports I'm summarizing are over 120 pages of details, even by counties, county level lodging information. Not going to go through all of that stuff. We're going to just, but you're welcome to pull those down anywhere. They're public for those. So I'm just going to hit the highlights of these things. And then kind of what our dealership, what we do when we work. And one last thing on that, our dealership, it may be the 5th most popular, but in terms of funding, we're down in the middle to lower section of funding. Wyoming has more funding than our state. We have about $20 million annually. California has 195. Arizona has 60 million. Wyoming has 22 to 24 million. And you probably, how many are seeing more states than they ever saw advertised on TV besides Nebraska? It's not for everyone. Right? So it's a dogfight out there for the visitor. So, but anyway, we'll talk about that more a little bit. But that funding of that 20 million that we have, we partner with our brands about 1.8 million of it. So almost 10% of our money is re-partnered with our local destination management organizations. So for example, Durango, Rachel, we see her at IPW, and that's the International Trade Show, and we help pay for that booth. So we partner to get Durango there so that they just have to get their air flights and stuff when we do that. And then also, before I move on, I have 15 board members, and I want to recognize Representative McLaughlin for being on our board. We'd love to have our board members, so thank you so much. All right, so direct spending in Colorado. This is all tourism and it's all the state, and we'll break it down to the western side here in just a second. But macro picture, we were at 24.2 billion. We dropped to 15.5 billion, and we rebounded to 21 and change. All right, so we had a nice rebound, but not all the way back. So we have some breakouts, statistics. Here's how many visitors in aggregate. Here's the average spend. I want you to see that average spend, $469. So per guest, not counting airlines, but spending money here, gasoline, rental cars, anything once they're in the state, it averages about $469 per person per spend. That's a key number because we look at that based on business traveler. We also look at that based on international traveler by country. And I can give you all the stats of all those, but that's an important average number. Here's the overnight trips. We actually measure day trips and overnight trips in that report, so you can kind of see it. And again, you can look at it on a county level if you want to. And then overnight business trips. So you can see that the business side of it hasn't recovered yet. Denver represents about half of that 24 to 21 billion dollar recovery, 24 to 15 to 21, right? Denver represents about half of that, and they're still struggling on the business side of it. Business transient, business group conventions have not recovered yet. It's interesting here, the seasonal trips, overnight trips, our state is pretty well balanced if you look at it in total. But as we all know, the devil's always in the details based on the regions that you live in. On the right, kind of interesting how many visit family and friends outdoors, and we look at those trends and how they change. I don't know where the cruise number comes from. They always ask me that at the bottom. I don't think we have a cruise industry, but they did tell me what that meant one time. I don't know what that is, but the other stuff makes sense. So here's what they come here: business activities, cultural. This is where the activity of these groupings happen. So we measure all kinds of demographics so that we can make sure that we market correctly. Oops, there we go. I don't want it to move off of that. Okay, so this chart right here, I can look at this every month. And what this chart illustrates is it shows you on and then right up here, on the top, it shows you, again, this is the grand total. So it shows you now, you can see 2022 now, what's happening in 2022. So we talked about 2021 rebounding to 21 million and not quite back, but you can see the months that we're up and down, that we're almost back, but we're not quite. But again, the devil's in the region. And I can actually even look at all the states. Internationally, here's what's going on internationally. So I want to just touch base on international. I said 24 billion. The international of that 24 billion in 2019 was 1.8 billion. So it represents about 8.5%, okay, of the international travel. Why are those guys important? They spend 5 times the amount that a domestic traveler spends. So when they come to Colorado, on average, overseas from UK or Germany, they spend $2,000 per stay versus the $469 that I showed you. They stay Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursdays. They stay the full week. They're not here for the weekend. As a former hotelier, and Mary Jo, she was talking, 28 years of experience, and having her here, she understands what that is. It's better to have somebody there for a week and do stayover service and turning it over and back and forth and all that 9 yards. So the international travel is still not recovered yet. In 2020, in March, it was shut down. So we had basically in the bank January and February in 2020. In 2021, wasn't even open until November and December. So 2021, the international number, and this is not in my report, it went from 1.8 down 83% to 306 million, and it's bounced back a little bit to 365. I actually expected it to be less than 300 million because January and February are different than November and December in those years. But what happened is Mexico has traveled very heavily. We have a lot of directs. A lot of us know that we have a lot of Mexican residents, Mexican family and friends on the Western Slope, and especially in the Vail area. And so that traffic actually could helped us kind of level out, but we're still down 80% on the international travel. This kind of illustrates it. The only green part down here, everywhere else by the country. And I can tell you by country, in your region, what area, we track all this stuff, how they come into your area. And we represent 5 different international communities, but we think that this is a key for some of our recovery. So it's not even. This is 2019 to 2020 on the recovery. We all know that this area, the area that we're in, is seeing record numbers. A lot of places are seeing record numbers. But when you look at 2021, there are 4 communities that definitely are above an occupancy rate and overall revenues in hotels. And that's Telluride, Grand Junction, Glenwood Springs, and one other. The following areas are recovered in rate and overall revenues, but they're still down in occupancy. Okay, that's Aspen, Vail, Breckenridge, and Steamboat. And when I say down in occupancy, we made it up, our communities made it up in the average rate, so the total revenues are there, but you have less people. What that means in terms of tax revenues is less people spending money in restaurant, retail, or whatever. You have a lot of day trips, they're not going to spend as much in buying sweatshirts and going out to restaurants and spending time in the communities. So if you look at your occupancies in your areas, those are kind of important, even though the revenues may be looking like gangbusters. Aspen, June 2021 to June 2019. This is June. Their occupancy actually dropped 83% to 73%, but their average rate went from $650 a night to $950. That was Aspen. Then the residents are like, oh my gosh, we got too much tourism. But their occupancy is actually down. But what happened is second homeowners and a lot of things came into that community. Yes.
Thank you. Being on the Aspen City Council, what I'd like to mention is I don't know that you're able to effectively count short-term rentals in private residences anymore. They are not reporting the way a hotel reports. And our community went into a moratorium last December. We're coming out of it this August to regulate short-term rentals because there were thousands, and there are even thousands more in the county. And that is your new occupancy. It's not in the hotels.
Yeah.
But we're not counting that. And so I'll have further comments later.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Well, I'm glad that you brought that up because short-term rentals and how we measure it, we are looking at that. So I am talking specifically about Star, so totally understand, and that's an excellent point. But we're looking at the short-term rentals, and we have partners that are actually going to help us with that, and also forecasting of a lot of short-term rentals that are actually on some systems that we're able to track. So we'll come back to that. But the recovery, you can see that Denver, it's a tiny little spot there, but it represents a big portion of the tourism spend is still down, but you can see the areas that are recovered. Our latest graph is this one, and I'm waiting for the counties, but it's kind of showing the same pictures. We kind of look at the regions, and so we have some regional data, but it's not as specific as the county. So I'm still waiting on the county heat map for 2021. And again, we'll get this to you. So headwinds, want to talk a little bit about headwinds. So right now we track every month. What are people saying out there? We have a company called Longwoods and Miles. They partner and they survey thousands of people, tens of thousands of people across the country that are travelers. And this is kind of the trend of, does coronavirus impact travel decisions in the next 6 months? So you can kind of see by month over the last year, what's going on with that. So that's a great trend for us. It's still out there, still 19% of people that are watching it, but it's definitely moving in the right direction.
And just look at me for the slides.
What's that?
Look at me for the slides.
Okay. So then this one is the transportation costs. This is the new elephant in the room. Transportation costs are starting to look at travel. So I want to just back up for just a second. Travel in the world was shut down. So it's basically like a hot air balloon that then went all the way down to the size of my daughter's balloon at a birthday party. That's the supply, right? It basically shriveled to nothing. Then it's starting to get bigger again. The balloon's starting to get bigger, but it's still not to the big heated balloon that can go anywhere. So what's happening is there's pent up demand on travel, and we got to experience a lot of the lift in our Western slope because of outdoor space and these types of things. People driving through from New Mexico and Texas, coming in short term or whatever, outdoor space, second homeowners, all this stuff happening at the same time. My son and his fiance and his in-laws are touring Europe now for three or 4 weeks. They're there now. And they were supposed to go in 2020. Well, the pandemic hit. That was it. He skied, he hit Breckenridge, he hit Steamboat, he was there for long weekends or whatever it is. He stayed in state with his fiance. Now he's in Europe. The same thing's happening all over the place where pent up demand has pushed travel in different locations, and now it's kind of like ripples, so to speak, in terms of demand. And now we're seeing transportation and this demand open, that we see this as possible headwinds to watch. So here's the rising gas prices. We started monitoring it in March, and here's where we are as of July the 6th. So it's kind of moving up the range. Then here is impact of gas prices on travel plans. And here is just the last month to 2 months, right? From May to July. This is current. This is not like 2021 stuff. This is like 2 weeks ago. All right. So reducing the number of trips. It was only 36% in May. Now all of a sudden it's 39%, and now it's up to 44%. And we'll get the August number and watch the same thing. But we just have to be aware of the type of visitors that we had. They weren't international high-paying visitors. They were commuters or whatever coming into there. So we see possible headwinds in moving forward. You can see here, I'm choosing destinations closer to home. I'm reducing the amount I spend on retail. That's not good for any of the shops. I'm reducing the amount of entertainment and rec because I just don't have as much because it costs me so much to get there. I'm reducing the amount I spend. I'm trying to get the better lodging price. And maybe I'm gonna drive, maybe I'm not. That's still up in the air. And some, whether they cancel the trips, et cetera. Okay. So these are things that we're watching. There's one other report that just came out that's specific to the Western region that I'm gonna actually read that includes short-term rentals. Okay. It's so data economics tracks all of the mountain regions in the Rocky Mountains. So it includes Idaho, Wyoming. It specifically lists out Telluride, Steamboat, but it also hits other Rocky Mountain regions. So what they're seeing is they're actually seeing a little bit of a headwinds in terms of the booking pace currently out there for the mountain regions. So they showed an increase, but then they're showing that this summer is coming back. And I have this, it's going to pull here the specific numbers. There we go. Only Idaho is actually showing an increase. All the other areas are actually showing a decrease this current summer in terms of occupancy coming back, and that it's going to continue to put pressure on the ADRs. So, and it's the source is Key Data. Key Data tracks the short-term rentals, the hotels, the whole 9 yards. So there's the largest drop in occupancy for the summer. Telluride down 14%, Jackson Hole down 16%. So what this group does is it studies just STRs and the group bookings forecasted for the mountain regions of the Rocky Mountains. So I just want to make sure everybody's kind of aware of what's happening out there right now.
And online, there was a question if that's on a website.
We will get this to Joanne and we'll try to get that out there for you. So we'll get the article there. Again, it just got emailed to me this morning and I'm like, oh, put that in the presentation. Because I want to tell people what's going on with 2021, 20, but then also what our office does and how we track these things to try to make sure that we're better prepared. So our objectives is to influence high-value travelers to all areas that actually have the value of Colorado. And you'll understand what that I mean by that when we get a little bit further in the presentation. But we want to educate visitors and residents on anything related to stewardship and responsible travel. Super important to us. We have a campaign right now called Shine a Little Brighter. That is our campaign to try to get, that is our dealership campaign. The campaign to just get everybody here to the state. These are a little bit of the takes of the Shine a Little Brighter. And then we're going to skip this one because I want to move into. The other part of our marketing campaign that we did not have before is Do Colorado Right. Do Colorado Right came to be because in 2020, we weren't marketing anymore because we weren't accepting people in the state anymore, essentially. We were all in lockdown mode or in social distance mode. And so we pivoted and created a Do Colorado Right to try to educate the visitors. Well, now we use this campaign throughout our advertising to make sure that people understand how to do Colorado right. And if we could, let's see if we can get this video to play because this will kind of explain it.
How to Do Colorado Right by me, Red Gerard. After I ride, I don't do this. I do this. And just to be safe, I do this. That's how you do Colorado right.
I do this, or even this. Okay, maybe not that. That's how you do Colorado right.
I love you like la 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 la.
I don't do this.
Hey.
I do this. Or this. And if I can, this.
You've just been brother lucked. That's how you do Colorado right.
As health and safety restrictions subsided, we pivoted Do Colorado Right to address the issues and concerns facing our state.
When I'm not driving this, I'm riding this or this to reduce my travel footprint. When I'm camping, I check for fire restrictions with one of these or one of these. That's how you do Colorado right.
Do you hear that? Nothing, because I don't hike during peak times. Pick up your trash. It's like I was never here. That's how you do Colorado right.
So we have a couple of other campaigns out. Those fire safety message, we're now partnering with CDOT. We're partnering with the Department of Agriculture. Department of Agriculture is concerned about big game migration, big animal migration, because the impact of the wildflowers and with the ATV vehicles. So now we're preparing a message for those visitors. We could serve this up to the retail divisions that have this. Anybody that searches for ATV vehicles in Colorado is going to see this kind of messaging. So out there, we're promoting stewardship and how to take care of Colorado as much as we can. One of our newest ads is, and oh gosh, his name escapes me, but he's from Cortez. And he's an African-American hiker that just took the first Black group, the summit of Everest. All right. He's doing our backcountry safety spot, you know, and it's like, he's an expert. I'm like, oh my gosh, we're so lucky. This guy's in Cortez, you know, leading a diverse group hiking, and he's doing our message about how to do Colorado right. So in your communities, as you look at your destination management organizations, we serve these up and let them put it out in their communities how they want. And some communities are even adopting Do Crescent Butte right. And these types of things, so that we can really elevate our campaign to really try to take care of our environment, but also make sure that they understand, okay, fire safety, that's getting pounded out there as much as we can across all the medians, because we know how critical that is to our livelihoods in the state, but our environment and everything. So that's how we kind of get that word out. We spend 17% of our advertising budget now in this area to try to take care of Colorado. And again, we partner $1.5 million out of our $20 million to the local communities to figure out how they want to market, how they want to do their regions right. And there's a lot of great plans across the state. The value of tourism, I think a lot of us know what that is, and it's been rough because it's been busy, short-staffed, all kinds of stuff. But the top opportunity is investment in the tourism. More important, and what I mean by that is we're actually the communications vehicle out to the tourists in our communities. What you guys do is amazing, and what we want to do is project what you see as important to put that word out to the community, but also the residents. We're basically your megaphone for whatever you want to say, and we want to hear what you have to say to figure out how we can do Colorado right. So stewardship. Let's keep moving forward. So we have we have 3 departments in our primarily that in our office. Next slide. And one of the big part of what we do is stewardship. So we have we want to inspire travel within a destination, but we also want to enhance visitor experience and protect our assets and improve residents' quality of life. So the destination management organizations used to be just marketing and research, and that's what most people know us as, destination management or marketing organizations. Well, it's added a lot in terms of leadership, product development, and partnership. That's been the last couple of years. And now these green circles are what's super important, especially to the areas that have already recovered. How do we manage visitation better? One way is communication. So we have, with the help of our board of directors and some other things, we are working on kiosks in all of our welcome centers. We have more than 1 million people come through our welcome centers. So if you're coming from Omaha and you're on your way, you're driving and you stop in Julesburg because you got to stop for the bathroom. Across there's the welcome center. You go in. You get to talk to one of our reps. they are gonna eventually be able to use this tool, but they talk to the guest and he's on his way to Moab to mountain bike. Well, you know what? They say, did you ever try mountain biking in Crested Butte or Durango, or even Trinidad? Or Cortez, right? Do you really want to go all the way to Moab, or do you want to spend an extra day cycling someplace closer that's easier to get in and out of the state? That's what our Welcome Center does. They're in our dealership. They're trying to point to the right brand. This new technology, kiosks, are going to connect to the local destination management organizations so they can prioritize what they want in those communities as the most important. So I'm going to give another example, Aspen again and Crested Butte. We met with the people in Aspen and we did workshops, and those workshops indicated, hey, you know what? We're spreading people out. This is great news or whatever. The Forest Service guy kind of raised his hands like, yeah, it's a little bit of a problem. I'm like, what? It's a problem. He's like, yeah, it's a problem. He's like, you're redirecting them to trails that we don't have parking and we don't have bathrooms. And that's a problem. We would rather they book the reservations at Maroon Bells and be done with it. In Crested Butte, it's like, we want everybody spread everywhere because we got 400 miles of biking trails, whatever it is. So each community's got its own need. We want to connect those communities with their needs. The other thing that we're doing with this app is we're exploring parking. And parking, we can serve up real-time forecasting of if the parking lot's full or if it's not full, and how to redirect people to the areas, saving our carbon footprint, our visitor experience, and also prioritizing by those destinations where they want them to park first, and then second, and then third. That we have, Oktoberfest. This is where you need to park to pick up a van to get to Oktoberfest. Don't even bother going over here. We want to serve that up through the welcome centers. So what happens is once you key on this and then you take the cell phone with you, it'll indicate, as long as you leave it on, it'll indicate where you are and update you where you are based on that local, where you happen to be, and served up information based on those local management organizations' priorities. So that's where we're headed to right now. So it's already been tested in a couple of other places. So we're working on that. And the parking, to me, the parking is really the key in terms of actually putting counters on parking lots, even possibly on trailheads, to allow people to know, you know what, this trailhead's already 60% full and you're like 2 hours out. Probably best to choose something else. Right? And that's a better visitor experience, but it also manages it the way that we want in our communities. So stewardship is to care. So we are looking at a holistic approach to find the harmony between the quality of life of the residents and a visitor economy while protecting our cultural and natural resources. That harmony in each community is different. We know that. Again, we want to inspire to our dealership and let the brands take care of those things through the tools that I've kind of just illustrated. Let's go 2 more slides. So those are to evaluate responsible travel, to champion resilient destinations, and enhance inclusive and collaboration. These are our focus areas. We already have some of these programs. The Care for Colorado Coalition, which helps us drive the Do Colorado Right messaging. The Colorado Concierge, which is an educational resource for anybody that works in a welcome center that is a certificate program that anybody can go on at any time. I learned more things than that about fish and wildlife, hunting, and the impacts in the state is fascinating. Electric byways, our welcome centers we talked about, and then I'm going to hit on craft workshops right now. Let's move on. And here is Quinn, or not Quinn, somebody knows.
Philip Henderson.
Thank you, Mr. Henderson from Cortez. Let's see if we can play that one, because that's an awesome one.
How to Do Colorado Right? By me, Philip Henderson, backcountry enthusiast. When I'm prepping for the backcountry, I don't do this. Oh, Ouija board, will it rain today? I know before I go, and I do this. This. And this. That's how you do Colorado right. Will it rain today?
Yes.
So we actually measure these, there's been, they're very high level of success and resonate with people. But we also have the straight messaging that we're working with CDOT in terms of thickness of tires and stuff that you're gonna see come out here right around the fall time, where that partnership with CDOT is huge, because then we can kind of get that message out. So what do? We either lead, partner, or advocate. I showed you what we're doing kind of in leading, what we're doing on our advertising, Shine a Little Brighter. We partner that $1.5 million to $2 million that we partner with the local destination management organizations, and then we advocate. We agree housing is an issue. We agree workforce is an issue. We want to be at the table to help solve that. We want to show the value of tourism. We want to be the resource to connect the dots to solve those problems. But we don't totally jump in with both feet in terms of financial, because there's other departments that work on that we try to stay in our lane as much as possible. But we want to be there at the table to try to help solve those problems. So we had a recovery program. I talked about the example of Aspen and Crested Butte, but we had a restart where we went into all these areas between the months of August last year and December. So that's just the end of last year. And what we did after we met with these is gave 75 hours of free consulting, recovery assessment, and whatever they needed in those particular regions to solve whatever the problem was in those regions. These were all the areas that we went to. Next slide. It's easier to see it on a map. There's where we were. We spent 2 to 3 days in all these areas. I went to 2 or 3 of them. I went to Glenwood Springs. I went to Aspen to see exactly what these were about. In each of these areas, we provided we gathered the communities, we talked to individuals, we said, okay, what do we need to do? We did some course correction, and then we provided them resources on how they need to do better in their communities with the tourism that they might be experiencing. These are the associations. So not only were there specific regions, 28 regions, but 19 associations that we met with, that we also did the same thing. Almost $3 million in working with these areas and say, okay, here you go, here you go, here you go. And what do you need to do? How to fix it? How are we going to correct it? Let's go to the next slide. Here was the engagement. So there was nonprofit organizations, there was land managers at these meetings, residents, local governments, DMOs. It was a cross mix. If you are interested and weren't aware of this and you want information on this, let me know, because we'll have our destination team say, yep, here's who we met. Here's some of the results of your areas. Here's the programs they're working on. Here's what they're trying to do in your communities. Happy to get that out to you, because that's the part of our thing is making sure that everybody has the information so they understand, how we're trying to make sure that there's a right harmony of tourism. Of all those 28 and 19 associations, these were the commonalities. So I'm like, okay, what were the things that most everybody said? And these were the 7 things. So we're kind of adjusting some of our work to try to address these 7 points. So working towards the vision. Our vision is the holistic approach to find harmony for the quality of life of residents and a strong visitor economy, protecting our culture and natural resources. That's what we're trying to do. That's one of our pillars from the Colorado Tourism Office. We do it through programs, industry priorities, results, and try to get to 10-year outcomes. So we have the Craft Bench workshop. We have electric byways programs, dark sky programs. I could talk about all of these. We have common barriers identified. We try to align these things to our 10-year outcomes to get that balance of quality of life. So again, the investment in what we do, I think, is important, because we're trying to make sure that the people that come in here, as well as our residents, do Colorado right, that they take care of the community, that, hey, if you don't want anybody in your community, we totally get that. We let the welcome centers know, guess what? You don't want anybody there? Okay, there's plenty of choices here in the community. The eastern slope is out there, peace on the east right now. That's what they're calling it, because you can get out there, you don't have to fight I-70 traffic, there's great trails or whatever it is. And La Junta and all these guys are partnering up because they want some of what you guys have on the western slope. So we are here to help do whatever's best in your communities. And that's my presentation. Welcome to answer any questions. Sure.
Thank you, Jim. This is Ray Beck from Moffett County. Thanks for your presentation. I like the emphasis on the welcome centers throughout the state of Colorado and how important they are to tourism. I'm wondering, number one, I've got a couple of questions here related to the visitor centers. Have you visited all of them personally? Number one. Number two is what is the increased funding from the state of Colorado for these welcome centers? And are you providing money for charging stations? Thank you.
Perfect. Great questions. Have I been to all of them? Almost. I was on my way to Dinosaur and then I got called to get into a meeting. So I want to get out there. I love that. Tom, great ambassador for the Craig area, Moffett County, a terrific region. But I've been to, I think I have not been to Dinosaur and I have not been to the one outside of La Junta. But I've been to all of the other ones.
Okay, so the one in Dinosaur is probably the best one in all of Colorado. And that's the one you need to be going to ASAP.
You know what? I'm going to drive right up there now. No, I will get out there because there's just some unique things in Moffett County and the changes going on there are amazing. That museum up there is, I'll plug Moffett County and Craig and Tom all day long. The second question is funding. Well, our legislators did terrific in giving us a little bump. We had 10 welcome centers. Previously, it was 500,000 for the welcome centers. Okay, which if you do the math on 10 welcome centers, it's like next to nothing, right? They bumped it up to 250. Okay, so we got a nice little increase. But what we did in our budget this last year is I had some SLFRF funding for advertising. So I'm going to use that for the same amount of advertising we normally have. And I've moved $1.5 million more to the welcome centers to get this technology in there. So what we're doing with the welcome centers is we're actually branding them. And I'm going to just use the Starbucks, for example. The welcome center, these are your minimum things for a welcome center. So we're reviewing that. We're meeting with all the asset managers of the welcome center because they're all different. 3 are CDOT, some are other ones. Then we're creating that brand, what we want the individual welcome centers to be. Then we're creating the Starbucks in the grocery store brand or Starbucks Light or whatever you want to call it, Welcome Center Light, to try to figure out how we can connect all the welcome centers with this technology. So I have met with CADMO, which is Colorado Association of Destination Marketing Organizations, and we're all talking about how we can do this. We just granted Estes Park money for their kiosk in their welcome center so that they can do reservations to Rocky Mountain National Park so that you can see it right away. That's what I want all of these kiosks in all the welcome centers in all of the cities in Colorado to be able to do. Because that didn't used to happen. Before you could just show up, get in, get out. Now you have to do a reservation, which is a little bit of a problem for international travel, but that's something that I'm working on. The last part of that is charging stations. I can't answer that yet. I'm looking at that. They're looking at putting charging stations in certain areas, and I'm still trying to understand what that is. We have electric byways and charging stations. We actually sent people out to take photographs of electric cars driving in the mountains, but we don't have enough rental electric cars for me to advertise in Europe because some people want to fly into Vail and rent an electric car, and the opportunity is there a little bit more maybe than in Durango, but we're not pushing it, but we're ready to like turn that switch on when we can.
I'd just tell you that Dinosaur Welcome Center does have a charging station. So when you get your electric car, you are guaranteed a full charge there, sir.
Oh, there you go. Thank you so much. That's awesome. Yes, ma'am.
And I would just say that you can put it on, but you should add that to your kiosk thing, and just like the reservations on getting into the parks and things.
Absolutely.
But where's the closest?
Oh yeah, we'll put all that will be information that we'll want to serve up in the welcome centers for sure. So, and we have to figure out how to prioritize it, make it simple, and also make it so that when you get on there, you're not clogged up with a bunch of advertising or whatever it is. So that's, our vacation guide is gonna start adjusting slightly and some of those other things, because we want to serve up the best kind of content and messaging that we want and try to just get it specific. So the more partners I get on that, the more I'll be able to deliver and serve up that message. So thank you for that. We're looking at that. Yes, ma'am.
Thank you so much for the presentation. And, you know, there really is a lot of very innovative things happening. I greatly appreciate that. And I recognize the importance of tourism for my economy and the state. But we really can't gloss over the housing issue. You know, yesterday we had a presentation from the healthcare committee, which showed the incredible lack of staffing for our regional hospitals, whether it's nurses or maintenance people. We had a later presentation from the Department of Education and Education Committee about the incredible struggles to find teachers and to house teachers. And in our community, I just gave a housing presentation to our Rotary last week, and we looked up rental and real estate for sale prices in a 85-mile region, including Glenwood Springs and Alta Rifle, and those prices had gone up by 45% in 1 year, from 2021 to 2022. Short-term rentals do not pay property tax at a commercial rate. They pay at a residential property rate. So it's competing directly with our lodging in an unfair way. And not paying the commercial property tax means that it's leaving local governments shy for the infrastructure needs that they normally pay. A little sales tax collection doesn't make the difference versus the property tax for having a new commercial activity. You know, what's really happening is the service expectations of the guest for these high prices are not being met. And that's going to be a long-term problem. We really, you know, I guess my bottom line is looking at your graphs. We no longer have the workforce or the capacity to handle the same tourism levels we had in 2019. So to try to target to get back up to that number when the workforce has been depleted by 20–25% minimum in most of our areas, we can't do it. We can't handle it. And people are going to be leaving our areas saying, well, the little breakfast shop I used to go to had closed. There was an hour-and-a-half wait for a seat. The wait service was terrible. You know, they couldn't clean the hotel rooms because they don't have people. You know, whatever it is, the support staff is missing. And, you know, the definition of an optimizing a system is the point of running it right before it breaks down. How can you get it to deliver as much as possible before it all falls apart? And that's the point our tourism is reaching. Our existing employees are stretched so thin, they're covering other people's shifts, they're not enjoying their life there anymore. And it then reflects in the attitude to the customer. You know, when people are spending well over 50% of their take-home income, and the free market is simply not developing housing at an affordable rate, they're developing housing for second home ownership and maybe your top tier incomes. But this problem is not going away, and it can't be overlooked much longer. Thank you.
And thank you for that comment. We totally acknowledge that. I was in the hotel industry, and you know, there are times when I had to go and check in guests or had to go strip rooms for housekeeping, because I certainly couldn't make a bed. My wife will tell you that also. But to help out in those areas, and we do acknowledge that. And that's where we want to get with those communities, you know, right at the source, at the welcome centers. You know what, and if Aspen and Debbie and that group doesn't want anybody there in tourism, then.
That's not what I said.
Well, but not, I'm just saying, I'm sorry, if they want to redirect it into the area that's best for your community, then we want to do that. How do we solve the housing? I think we want to be at the table to try to help with that. We certainly, from the Hotel Lodging Association, the Restaurant Association, all feel those same things. And I'm a part of those organizations. So this is a huge problem. So how do we fix it? And I was talking with somebody outside, and I think this is the great group that could talk about what type of legislation is working in those communities. What have we done about short-term housing that we didn't do, and where are we in that cycle of points where we're at with that, so that we can maybe learn best practices across the cities, the mountain communities. We want to be there to try to figure out how to do it. When I got here in 1998, I managed the Lodge and Spa in Cordillera. The Lodge and Spa in Cordillera, I don't know if anybody's familiar with it, but yeah, it's just right outside, it's in between Beaver Creek and Arrowhead. And we actually had employee housing there. So we had to deal with trying to figure out how to get people employed. And at the time, in like 2010, it's interesting that our company didn't want to hire anybody that tested positive for marijuana, yet it was practically legal here, right? So we had to figure out how to work around that with the workforce. Then we had people stay with us in the workforce. Then we had to pay for the workforce housing. So all of the hotels recognize that, are working on it. Beaver Creek or Breckenridge, Bob Bartow, and now Mike Pappas, they're working on housing for employees and trying to solve that. So different companies are trying to do that also. I think we need to just come together in those communities and figure out the best way to solve it. It's an excellent point, though. We don't overlook it. Remember I mentioned lead, partner, and advocate? We definitely want to be at the table to advocate for how we can solve that. Yes, ma'am.
2 seconds, there you go. Naomi Dobbs with Congresswoman Bobert's office, but I'm also a new member of Club 20 and I've lived here in this area for 20 years. And so you kind of got me a little nervous when I was watching the presentation, because I was under the impression that for our tourism dollars here in the state of Colorado, and I know you're a state program, not federal, but that in Colorado, hunting has been a big revenue stream. And I didn't see that reflected in your imagery at all. And so I'm wondering, did COVID really take away our hunters for Colorado, or is it, can you answer to that?
Sure. I can run the ad for you on the Everything Shines a Little Brighter. There's hunting and fishing in that ad for our summer campaign. So it is there. It's certainly an important part of our economy. I think I mentioned it during the Colorado Concierge. It was something that when I first took that whole program, because I thought I might as well be certified in this Colorado Concierge, that it's there. That is a program that actually illustrates the importance to Colorado's economy and tourism. And Tom would tell you that up in Moffat County, huge important part of that economy as well.
Thank you for the clarification.
Yeah, no problem. Sir.
Gotta wait 2 seconds, right? Michael Murphy, Hinsdale County. One of the things, I'm chairman of the Lodging Tax Board for Hinsdale, so tourism, I get to see the raw numbers. By the way, we got a new rock star named Kate Hobson in Hinsdale, so if you want to meet one of the best marketers around, please give Kate a call. But one of the things with the Lodging Tax Board that we've seen is with, what is it, 1117, the last bill that was passed, that now does allow some lodging tax funds to go for trails and for affordable housing. In areas like Rachel's area there in Aspen, they got a lot of money. We get $100,000 a year to basically promote an entire county. But we are making strides, and we've actually pulled some of that money aside for low-income house or attainable housing. This is a new buzzword, but appreciate your presentation. Very, very well done. And thanks for everything that Tourism Board does.
Thanks for that introduction to that gal. We certainly want to talk to them. And again, we want to get out to all of the communities and continue to get out there to make sure we find the right harmony and figure out how to solve these things. And one of the things in the Aspen area was interesting. We were out there. We actually created a coalition of that whole between Aspen and Glenwood Springs. So we actually are coordinating meetings between all three of those regions. So Aspen, Snowmass, Glenwood Springs, and everything in between, because we know the workforce lives right in the middle of there. So how do we protect that? Because it impacts all the areas. So it's great to see some of the collaboration start to happen to recognize these problems. And I want everybody to keep bringing them forward, because we want to be there to figure out, okay, who can we talk to over here? You know what I mean? Like, there's best practices out there. Some of you guys got the best ideas there that are percolating that we want to try to get across to other areas that, hey, this worked or this didn't work. But stewardship is certainly important, and the right balance and quality of residents' life is certainly important for us. Is there any online questions?
Just another quick comment. Other Colorado draws, maybe gunslinging, horseback riding, rodeo, of course, the train and the old Western town images, and the antique hotels. I'm not sure if your videos are also reflecting those in the area as well.
Yeah, so great question. We did a huge partnership with Rocky Mountaineer to highlight that train that goes through Central, but it also really highlights all of our trains and with History Colorado. So again, I like to use the analogy of the car dealership. All of these things fall into those brands within our dealership that we just want to inspire them to come to Colorado and let them see these other things. Our PR team works really hard on these individual types of opportunities. If you get a chance, sign up for Tourism Tuesday. And every Tuesday, we give you like 3 high-level things, and then we tell you what our PR team's doing to really try to connect the dots to these wonderful assets that were just mentioned in that conversation. Because when our railroads are the top railroads in the country, from Silverthorne or the western slopes here, we want to make sure that that's out there. So then we carry those things forward through our PR team. So that's kind of how we do it, those individual stories. We try to tell those individual stories as much as we can. Right, any other questions? Well, thank you again for presenting, but thank you guys for what you do, and please keep us informed so that we're doing the right things. I just want to make sure everybody understands what we're trying to do. And if you want any more detail or numbers, or hey, do you have a survey from your community or whatever you need, or do you have a couple of things that we can share, the best things that we can do are when we're informed about, as much as we can to try to make the best decisions for Colorado. So thank you guys so much.
You can try. Okay. Try this one. Okay. Thank you very, very much. We really appreciate your time coming over here. Tourism is a huge economic base for so many of our communities. So, and we do have a lot of those issues. And I think as we move forward, this committee may, actually need to look at some of those issues that face our community, whether that's bringing new policies on or just addressing some, even just getting information, as Tim said, on best practices that are out there in our communities and how some of our communities are handling perhaps affordable housing or short-term rentals. And maybe other communities like mine can get ideas on how to move forward better. So thank you so much. Okay, we have 2 resolutions on the books, and I do, once again, I think everybody knows the 2-second rule on the microphone, so there we go. But we do have 2 resolutions on the books, so the committee has looked at this. These are 2 policies that are expiring, so they are back up to see if they should be continued, amended, or deleted. The first one I have is 1001. Is that what tourism promotion? Nope. Okay, so this one is CDL requirements for passenger vans. The only change on this was we felt that there needed to be some delineation on what CDOT has, as well as and what is required for a CDL license. So on the last now therefore, there is a clarification that Club 20 opposes any requirement that drivers of passenger vans less than 16 passengers be required to maintain a commercial driver's license. Currently, CDOT does require 16 passengers or more. So that was just a clarification. Any comments with Ray?
Yeah, Mary Jo, I'd like to move that we approve the current resolution 10-1 as amended and recommended to move on to the full board.
Do I hear a second? Steve, thank you. Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed?
None noted. Thank you. Okay, this one is a little bit more, it's like, I feel like I'm on the transportation subcommittee right now. This one's a little more detailed. This one also, the majority of the corrections here are updating the statistics. Now, I will say that with receiving the newest Colorado statistics, I don't know if I can do this. I don't know if Christian's in the room or Brittany advice. Perhaps the statistics that we have were the latest that we had. And so with the new ones having just come out from the state, I guess I would look to see about maybe just updating the numbers in this resolution. Can I do that? Oh, there's Christian in the back. So I guess I'm looking for some guidance. In addition to, we've added a couple whereas, but as far as the statistics, I think I would like to move forward with the most recent, and since those came out this week, we didn't have those.
Absolutely. We can do that.
Okay, great. So I'm going to look at this. Again, the first one is the second whereas is primarily an updating of statistics. In the first where I'm going to go back to the first whereas we have deleted is projected to create more Colorado jobs this year than any other business sector. That was old and it was replaced. And we will put in new numbers with where in 2017 tourism was one of the job creators. We will replace that with the most recent statistics. Most of it is wordsmithing. We have added the fourth whereas is the National Come to Life marketing campaign ranked among the top 10% in the US for ROI and campaigns effectiveness, and the Colorado.com website ranked #1 as the most visited state website in the US. And there you go. How about that? I don't know if even Tim heard that. But yes, and again, we will change this from 19 to 20 to 20 to 21 statistics. We also have added some of the new campaigns that the state is running. Please understand that this policy is to continue to ask the legislature to support tourism funding in the state of Colorado. So what was added here was some other examples that were not in the old policy that are programs such as the Are You Colorado Ready or Colorado Cares. Those programs were added to this funding policy. So any questions or comments or wordsmithing? Miss Nancy.
I haven't read it. I'm sorry, but I really like the presentation on Do Colorado, right? I assume within your wording, it would give us the ability to support that program.
Yes. One of the things we're also looking at is they have a specific kind of subdivision. I am going to, and they are looking for support for that program. So I am actually, we talked about it in our subcommittee meeting to actually add a policy specifically for the Do Colorado Right and the sustainability portion of supporting Colorado. Does that work? Okay. Any other? Okay, great. So with the understanding that we would update this policy with the most recent numbers, and I don't know if Tim's still here, but I wanted to let you know, I think this is only the second time he's been able to present those numbers to anybody in the state. So good job, Club 20. So with that understanding, to change those numbers to the most recent one, do I hear a motion to approve? Do I have, who's moving? Sue? Okay.
Who was the second?
Steve? No, Steve. Who was the second? Steve, another Steve. Okay, great. Any other questions or it's great when you have a complicated one like this at the end of the day. You all are glazed and wanting to get to lunch. I love it. Okay. Okay, all in favor? Any opposed? Okay, this one is passed. Thank you. Those are two, as I mentioned, thanks for bringing that up, Nancy. We are looking to look to, as the tourism group, to look at that sustainability and that support position as water and public lands and everything, and that's our focus. So again, we're all faced with these issues as tourists come to your community, as they camp more, as they're in our public lands more, that we as communities support this and as Club 20 supports those initiatives here on the Western Slope. I'm going to again ask you, not necessarily as just Club 20 members here, but as members representing your community, we are looking to rebuild this tourism subcommittee. If you have someone in your community that you think would really help us out, and that's a diverse, maybe it's a restaurateur in your community, maybe it's someone that owns a rafting company or, you know, a cycling company, please contact me and I would be happy to reach out to them to be a part of this group. We want to be overarching and encompassing. It's not just lodging or food and beverage or, you know, what we think is the most common denominator. It's all of those industries that make up our tourism businesses in our communities. So thank you so much. Please, I would love to talk to them. Just reach out to me. I think that's it, except for, once again, I missed it, but I heard that the reception last night was great. Centura Health, thank you so much. It's support like that that allows us to have fun. So thank them for having a great reception and sponsorship, as well as don't run out the door yet before you have lunch. And Four Corners Materials, we thank them for their sponsorship as well. And thank you all. Am I wrapping it up? We're wrapping it up. Thank you all for coming to Southwest Colorado. Have a safe trip back. Now you know what it's like to drive to the north. So safe drive. Have fun for Red Mountain and Kobe Gamolas, and we'll see you all in the fall. Thank you.
Great work, Rachel. You did it. How was it?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, and we'll make sure that we'll.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'll send it out. I'll get those numbers corrected because I have those. Perfect.
I have a suggestion for you.
Yes, sir.
All of those things, the details you're gonna have to change every year. The purpose of these is just so that when somebody calls and says, is Club 20 support or opposed? These are a good number. It's good to have support, but you're gonna have to change it every year.
Oh, yeah, I know.
So.
Well, they
and
weren't for 5 years.
As long as they're still relevant.
Yeah. Okay.
Having the exact numbers might be less.
Well, here's what I figured. If I could get 21, then I have to change them for several years.
Well, you want to change them, then you could also just say,